The school board work session begins in 2 minutes. Please take your seats. Again, the school board work session begins in 2 minutes. The school board work session begins in 1 minute. Please take your seats. Again, the school board work session begins in 1 minute.
Good morning. I now call the Tuesday, February 20th, 2024 Administrative Briefing and Work Session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9 a.m. Please silence your electronic devices to avoid disturbing others. Mirroring and modeling how our students begin each day, I ask that you pause with us for a moment of silence. Please join me. Thank you. I'll now read our board commitment statement. We are the Marion County School District Leadership Team. When we come together to work, we are efficient, effective, and productive. Our three most important characteristics are dedicated, transparent, and individually responsible. To work well together, we must demonstrate respect, confront reality, and be accountable. We will always put students first, and we will leave a legacy of success. I will now ask the school board attorney to explain the rules for this public work session. Good morning, Attorney Powers and team.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meetings and its work. In compliance with Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comment regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form located in the lobby and hand it to the board clerk. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the board clerk will call the speaker's name in the order received. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. I thank you for your attention to these important rules.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. Ms. Martinez, will you please provide the proof of publication for today's meeting?
The notice for the February 20th, 2024 work session was published in the Ocala Gazette on February 9th, 2024. Proof of publication has been attached to board docs under proof of publication.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
We will now begin the work session with the superintendent's administrative briefing. Good morning, Dr. Gullett.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Great to see you on a sunny day today, on Tuesday. Yeah, nice to have it sunny again. I just want to provide a thank you. I'm so pleased to participate on Saturday at Fezziden's Legacy Day, and it sure was rainy, but what an amazing day that was of celebration, and I called it a museum set up in the gym. Just remarkable artifacts and history, and so just shout out to our amazing principal there and her PTO and her community for a great day of celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett. Yes, that really was a wonderful way to start the day, and to have so many of our principals there to be honored was also very special. Great morning. Okay, well, we will jump right into our only agenda topic for today, which is rural development policy updates continuing.
Thank you very much, Board. As we were here the last time, we identified a few remaining that we needed to address today. These should be, hopefully, relatively short and sweet. But of course, if there's any discussion, or I will point out that if the board had any ones previously that we did not discuss from our last time that you would like to bring up again today, we've advertised both for both sessions. So if there was any policy that you wished to bring back up, you're certainly entitled to do that as well. But we've got it narrowed down to, I think, about 8 policies in total that we'll be dealing with today. Each of you should have an addendum, which was uploaded, but also you have physical paper copies in front of you. And these are each of the items that we identified last time that we would bring back to the board for the board's review, because they either required a little additional work, or there was some question or some wording that we needed to look into. So we will start with the first one in your packet, which is policy 1120. And this is as to employment of administrators. So give me just a moment to bring this back up here on mine, and I'll take a moment for each of you to look and become familiarized with that packet. Thank you. Okay, and I think in this one, the issue was there you go, the pink on the screen. Members of administrative staff are required to have listed telephones at their residences. The regulation and extension of the 6-month, this regulation includes principals and assistant principals. We actually were unable to locate this within a statutory requirement. And so what we would recommend is what you see there in green, as well as deleting that portion that requires a listed telephone number.
Chair.
Yes.
Attorney Powers, thank you for that. I concur with that. My only question, though, and this was just in speaking with some other school board members around the state, whenever I mentioned that, looking for statutory requirements, they also have alluded to DOE rules. So I just want to ensure that when we are looking at statute, we're also looking at all the DOE rules to ensure, because sometimes they aren't always the same.
Right, we do look also at the FAC, the Florida Administrative Code, and if a DOE rule has made it to the Florida Administrative Code, we do look at that as well. If DOE has simply issued guidance, guidance is not controlling. So this board may choose to do whatever it does. Now, at some point in the past, it is very likely that some other districts had adopted this and simply chose to continue to adhere to it. I would say specifically in this case with listed telephone numbers, it probably is adhered to simply because no one has thought to remove it. But that's my supposition. So
I tend to agree. I
Yeah.
think it's old language that's outdated and has been sitting there forever, and I'm glad we're striking it. Anything else from the board? Any other discussion? Okay. Was that it for this one?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And now moving on to the next one, which should be policy 2431.
Interscholastic athletics.
I'm sorry, is that, give us just a moment, technical issues.
This was just regarding the grades listed, right?
Right.
Sorry, what did you say, Board Member James?
It was just regarding the listing of the grades and the title of the schools.
Right.
Well, and now there's a clarification of intramural competition as opposed to just interscholastic. Because our middle school sports are considered intramural as opposed to,
So these are
Governed by
the,
FHSA.
yes, exactly. These are the, if you see in green there, this is the proposed update, just to simply indicate intramural competitions involving middle schools, grades 6 through 8, strike the whole language about junior high schools and high schools. Involving middle schools shall be in accordance with standards established by the school district.
Thank you. We good?
Yes.
Okay. I like how this is going.
Wait, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So this took out high schools, it's just talking about middle school now?
Because it's just talking about intramural.
Yeah.
sports.
Okay.
Intramural
Okay.
communications, right,
Gotcha.
or
I guess my only question then is, should the title interscholastic athletics be changed to intramural competitions, since we've stricken
Oh,
interscholastic
I think we can add
athletics?
to the policy title, interscholastic athletics and
And
intramural competitions.
Okay.
And that may do exactly what you're asking.
I mean, I don't have any, something I noticed as I looked up, so I don't
Right.
care either way, but.
because the rest of the policy does reference interscholastic, which is FHSAA and all of that. So I concur with adding intramural competition to the title.
So interscholastic athletics and intramural competitions?
Okay?
Is the competition word necessary?
No, I think you're right. Interscholastic athletics and intramural competitions, and remove the hyphen between interscholastic and athletics.
It's just something, minus the space.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Our next item would be 2623, policy 2623. Give everybody a moment to get to that specific section.
Student assessment.
It's a change in language.
just taking language change.
And that was one that just hadn't been done, so it's now updated, is what, yep, so
So
take a look at it, 2623.
the first line, it does look like the word shall is not needing to be struck through, whatever.
Oh, yes,
Otherwise, we've lost our full verb.
you are correct.
District assess.
I mean, if it's optional, then may would work great, but.
Well, here it's specifically that one of the issues is that the proposed update says school board shall, but then there is administrative code which actually indicates that the district, that although the school board has the ultimate duty, it is it's a delegable duty, so it's delegated to operations. So the district shall assess student achievement. So,
Got it.
And that has to be a shall because it's required.
right.
I was,
We can't respectfully decline.
Now, it does, at the bottom there, it says the board shall, or board will require the following. And those are the things that are required. But again, here, the board delegates those things, delegates those duties to operations, but those are the board's requirements in doing so. So when I delegate to one of my children to clean the garage, I have rules about how they're to do so, you know? And that's the same as to the statutory balance, so.
And you're on the back page, SBA 8, right?
207. Yes, 008.
Yep, okay.
And then in the scheduling of assessments, which is page 3 of the policy, but it would be below local so scroll down a bit. So this is just a point of note there under scheduling of assessments. So this was the change that was being made, going from the board establishing the schedules to the district establishing the schedules. But it does still say that the board will be approving these as an agenda item on a board meeting. So that was my question originally, and it seems as if even after staff has gone back, that is still going to be a requirement, that we'll actually be approving the testing schedules.
Yes, ma'am, and that's statutory, and that's why.
Okay.
But we set a general schedule, not a specific schedule. So, is that correct, Dr. Gullett? It's more of a eye in the sky,
School to school.
Time frame.
yeah,
Right, the window.
it's a window.
Per the statute, you have the framework, and within that window, you have to do the test. So yes,
Yes.
beginning date, ending date, correct.
Okay.
And then with that, the statement, the board will publish the testing schedules on its website using the Department of Education's uniform calendar. Will the board be doing that publishing, or will the district be doing that publishing?
It's right above the X.
Are you on?
We're on
We're on,
rescheduling of assessments.
yes.
That second sentence.
Yeah,
Right above the X.
the district.
Copied through that statute.
So it does say that the board will on our website? Okay.
Okay.
Statute.
008.
All right.
All of that is the same too with the district submitting the schedules to the Department of Education. All of that is statute.
Which section are you on? Sorry.
Same section, after 9,
Yes,
the district will submit all that statute language.
yes.
Okay.
It's either Florida statute or administrative code. At this point, I do not remember which it was, but I believe that's Florida statute.
Okay. So we're moving down then to assessment preparation. Same page.
Yeah, Chair, I didn't have any additional questions. I don't know if anybody else does.
No. Any more questions from the board on that part?
And a number of these also had to do with renumbering of statutory language. So we had to take out chunks and put chunks back in under renumbered and slightly edited sections as well, so.
Is there
Moving on.
anything- We're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next on your list. 5121 we'll address next.
Draft everything. It's a good time to mention everyone should check their emails because the lottery was announced yesterday, round 1.
Well, and that was actually going to be my question, Dr. James, because we are striking through all mention of lottery in this policy. And so I was just curious.
And this is a proposed update from NEOLA, but it was also reviewed by Mr. Ayers, who deals specifically with controlled open enrollment in comparison with Florida statute, in comparison with the administrative code. And this is currently the state of the law. So I don't believe that there was anything within this policy. I'll double check what I'm saying right now, but I don't believe there was anything in this policy that was optional or elective.
Okay, well, we are striking through item C under components of district-controlled open enrollment program that mentions the word lottery. So scroll up to the top. It's at the very top of the policy.
Do we have a lottery policy?
That's what my question was going to be. I'm not certain.
Item C.
But is there a separate policy specifically speaking about lottery?
That was deleted. I believe we do actually have it may be for waitlist lottery. Let me check this here.
You're checking, Terry?
Yes,
Okay.
oh, Terry is. I am too, so one of us will find something.
And perhaps we consider it like magnet enrollment, or there's something else, because currently a lottery system is how we accept students into our magnet programs, my understanding. Perhaps they're not classified under controlled open enrollment. This just confused me. I didn't know where we,
Yeah, we're looking at the lottery under 5120. We have a separate policy, 5120,
okay.
that outlines the procedures for the lottery.
Okay.
And I'm looking now.
Student attendance area.
Yeah, I'm waiting on a board docs delay.
Yeah, I don't know that I see it there, but maybe I'm missing it.
Okay, we have under section 10 in policy 5120, if more transfer requests are received than capacity will allow, those students applying for a transfer by the advertised deadline will be entered into a lottery, and spaces will be filled based on a random selection. So there's a provision within the controlled open enrollment in 5120 which permits the lottery procedure. So the district's controlled open enrollment program, where it says establish the appeals process for hardship cases, under C, it did strike provides a lottery procedure, but that lottery procedure is in fact already provided for in 5120. It does not indicate that we're required to do so. So
Perhaps I'm not.
honestly, whether that was in there or not,
Sure.
I'm trying to envision a scenario in which it would,
No, and that's fine. Perhaps I'm not asking the question correctly.
Yeah.
If this is the only policy that references a lottery system, do we need to have a policy for how we currently are accepting students into our magnet programs that does not mention lottery?
well, we do for controlled open enrollment, and that's under 5120, section
Right.
10.
But if there's nowhere established in policy where I would anticipate it actually would be in the policy 5120 for student assignment, but I'm not seeing anything anywhere listed that actually references what we're currently doing in practice.
I think you're right.
But does the lottery process have to be a policy, or is it a procedure?
That would be a procedure.
I mean, I guess I would just offer that I feel like it is one of those things that ebbs and flows and shifts year to year based on the needs of the district and the changing of the programs. And so I think having it in procedure is okay.
Well, the board has to broadly authorize even things that are procedures. However, in these sorts of cases, these are not known that they will, we can reasonably anticipate that there will be overfill by which we would create a lottery system for any remaining spaces or a space that becomes vacant after it's selected. However, that's also something that's a determination that is not necessarily a requirement. So that is something we can place in board policy, something that provides for a lottery, but then operations is now held to a lottery standard for it. Otherwise, we would allow that to be something that is within the more flexible domain of the superintendent's procedures, and then that's for the board to decide.
Dr. Gullett, what is your thoughts?
I see it in statutes, I'm just trying to determine if it's somewhere else right now. As far as the guidance for that, that's fine. I mean, we will put procedures in place, but I'm researching that procedure right now, that policy.
So should we put this off to the side for a few
We can
minutes?
pass this one, and I can see what I can find from Mr. Ayers on this one as well.
If we all, I think everything in this
It was removed on
that's been stricken and highlighted, we all agree with. It's just a matter of whether we should or should not strike that part in C, right?
And I'm fine with it in that policy. I'm fine with exactly the way it's done. My question, though, is,
we
does the
need
board need policy specific to magnet school enrollment?
Yeah.
And that's my question. And so,
So I guess technically, we don't need to put this to the side, because we all are in agreement that what this shows is correct and valid. We just may have created a window for needing something else.
To
Well,
your,
I would still say it is, though that's probably correct. We've got a couple feelers out right now to try to find additional information that we can probably get done by the end of our.
Yeah, I don't want to rush this, you know, I want it to be right and give the folks time
yeah,
to
because it was stricken on his.
get the research in, but also we can move on till that happens. If everybody's okay with that. Does that work? Does that help, Dr. Gullett?
Yes, I'm wondering is the question whether the board wants to have an additional policy or would prefer not to and then
we
do
need it?
procedures?
Because if
Correct,
if we do it, then we're bound.
correct.
My question would be
So
the
are you.
reason for the strike. My question would be the reason for the stricken language under C. We previously had provides a lottery procedure to determine student assignment.
Which is nice and broad.
Right. And
Does it
that
include
was,
magnet and everything
it's in
else?
statute.
I see it right here.
so establishing an appeals process for hardship cases may be the direction that the board has chosen to go, or maybe the direction that operations has chosen to go in the past, instead of filling those cases via lottery. So I'm checking into that right now, and I'll see if I get a response by the time we're done.
Okay, that's a good point.
So I think the two questions are, can we strike that? I think that's the first question, because
That's my question.
if it's in statute, I don't know that we can. And then the second question is, if we need to add somewhere, whether the word lottery or not applies to the policy I'm recommending. I would believe that in policy 5120, specific to student assignment, there would be a section about magnet enrollment. Because student assignment, they also control how students are assigned into our magnet schools, but I don't see that listed anywhere. Maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe that's in school choice options or something, but maybe I'm in the wrong policy. It feels like there needs to be some reference to how we are accepting students into our open enrollment.
Right, I agree, and I don't want to go a limb too far and make suppositions about it based on what I don't know. So I'm not sure why that was stricken. I just know that when I brought this back, that was one of the items that was stricken, so. If we move on from this, we'll make sure to recall it, so.
Are we pulling that one to the side?
It's like a little further research is,
And that,
Warranted.
yeah, research just for this session, I should have some answers by the end of the session,
okay.
depending on how fast we are, so, let's see.
Well, and I think cross-referencing the choice, what choice policies we have, to see what's reflected there could be maybe helpful.
Okay, what do you got up next?
Graduation requirement.
5460. Graduation requirements?
Yes, and we were getting rid of.
Getting rid of all kinds of stuff.
So on that one, the two sections were removed that were not applicable for this particular policy. Those had been mistakenly left in,
Okay.
Yeah.
and they are not applicable, so they were stricken.
So cleanup,
Yep.
okay? Anything else?
Not on this policy unless anyone from the board sees anything.
Board? Okay, we're good.
5465.
My only question here is referencing actually putting someone's name in policy and their specific email address. I didn't know if there was a way to list it as GED coordinator and maybe even have an email that's GED@marion.k12.fl. It's really difficult when we put people's names in policy.
We did a deep dive on this, and oddly, we found out it actually is required.
Wow,
In
okay.
this instance, to have a name included within it.
So crazy.
Though everything else, every other policy we do, every other best practice is to include the title, not the name. However, we also reference the fact that it is required by administrative code. So the board's GED coordinator may be contacted for questions. We made sure to go beyond listing the name and list the actual telephone number. Of course, if they send an email to that address and that person's no longer there, we're going to have to edit it quite quickly in board policy. However, those are also referenced on the district's website. So that portion would be altered immediately. I mean, if somebody went to policy, which would be a strange place to go, and found that name and emailed it, they'd get a bounce. If they called that number, they'd get connected to the right person. If they sent a letter, they'd get it to the right place. However, if they, the GED coordinator position and title, that's within the Marion County Public School Student Progression Plan. So if you look at the very bottom, we put a little section in there, and this was in communication with Dr. Livingood. Refer to Marion County Public School Student Progression Plan for criteria. And because of the sort of oddness of this being required, that the name actually go in there in administrative code, we put it all in there. We put everything possible so that there should be no chance that somebody can't contact this person, because they've got multiple ways of doing so.
Okay.
The kitchen sink approach.
And to
That's
your
right.
point, the phone number rings to the GED office. It doesn't, I was thinking, could we make it the just generic phone number so that if extensions changed or something, but has this extension been the GED extension for like some time? I'm just wondering, because if they rang to the main dashboard, they could just ask for the GED office and get transferred. And then regardless of if the number changed or if the office extension changed or whatever, our main number is never changing.
Right, and the 7200 number would ring through to the office that would be most responsible.
But
So,
what I'm saying is if for some reason that number attached to that office changed, if we have that number as our main switchboard number,
sure. That would definitely make it even more so, though those numbers, I'll point out that in our public records requests and things like that, though we may not list specifically the person by name, we do still list a phone number for the department. Because the person by name may change more rapidly, but the department's number or the department's, physical address may not change nearly as quickly. And we've kept, as the Marion County School Board, our address changed a couple of years ago,
So
But-
is it necessary or no to change the number to the main district number?
I wouldn't put the main district number because that's going to make it more difficult for a person to get straight through to the right department. And it would be, I would say, just based on my estimation, that number would be more likely to connect directly to the person that they need to get to, whether that person is still the listed person or somebody else that now works in that position. And this is why in every other policy, they don't list the person by name. They have to list the department, and then that's pretty much cleared up. Though we can list both numbers, and that would be my preference if we were going to list. I wouldn't list one or the other if we were going to use the main number, because the main number risks the possibility that their call may be diverted. So,
I mean, I'm not committed to it. I was just wondering if it'd be easier, so I'm cool either way.
Nothing is.
Well, and I make the same request of the email. I mean, can we just have a GED@marion.fl? I mean, because similar to what we have with public relations or board clerk or something like that, where it's just the generic, if
Title
you're
of
trying to
the
get to GED, you're going to get to GED@marion. I don't know, it just seems, if we have,
It seems like a very easy solution to me as well, but if that's not possible.
this is just the information given to me by Dr. Livingood, and I believe that probably I would err on the side of providing additional means of contact instead of deleting any. I would include at least this much information, and then if we wish to add additional information for contact, we can do so.
about this? How about keeping that number for now and then, and then the main number, and with an eye to, as we evolve through this process and become more future-focused, I do like the idea of emails, becoming more and more, board clerk, GED coordinator at Marion.K12. I just think that makes sense. There was a time when we had very few people coming and going. That's not the case anymore. So I think that's the confronting reality part of our board commitment.
And if I can, who's we're going to remember? I mean, maybe this individual will be with us until they retire in 400 years from now, and we would love that. But who's going to remember to change this? Who's putting that little note down?
Right.
Is that a
That's how we got.
love Terry notation? I mean, who's going to remember to edit this policy if the person changes?
Right.
Yeah, that would be during policy review. That would be the time. So staff would have to
So
review.
if it's going to happen annually, because I've seen policy review essentially happens annually, then I would greatly err on the side of making it more generic and less specific, because if there's a change, we vote on this in 2 weeks and there's a change the next day, it's not going to get changed for a year unless we intentionally pull it. So, I mean, Dr. Gullett, do you believe we could do a GED at marion.k12.fl.us email address that would forward to this individual's?
So I think it's a great question. Attorney Blackman stepped out to check on this other, but he did a lot of the legwork on this. He's the one that guided the staff on this. I need to get confirmation from him, because I have a note here that he received confirmation that that's how it needed to be.
Okay.
And that's correct. This what we have there is how it needs to be at minimum for what we're required to do.
Okay. Well, at least we could add.
If we want to be additionally helpful and add additional ways of contact, we can do that, but we're required at the minimum to have this, they have to be able to get a hold of this person.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have anything in policy currently? And if not, I would propose we consider it to prevent future boards from having to review policies that hadn't been reviewed in a very, very, very long time. Would it be prudent to put into a policy that the board shall review policies yearly or bi-yearly or something?
We did.
it's in
That's
there.
already there.
Okay, I just wanted confirmation of that, because
And currently,
all this good work, we want it to not fall
right,
flat.
and currently, we're at about twice a year. I would say the board is reviewing it twice a year, but your attorney and paralegal are reviewing it pretty much constantly. Like, we already have proposed future edits that we're starting to review now for the next time we're going to do this. So,
Okay, because this is, something that wasn't happening, and now we're getting on a roll and a routine, and I don't want that momentum to stop when there's other people in these seats.
We're going to keep going as long as the legislature keeps throwing new things at us.
We got more coming.
When do you think that'll stop?
We perish.
Maybe it'll slow down, I don't know.
But no,
There'll be fewer this year.
We currently already have something in policy that we discussed this, it's been almost 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago.
Okay, I felt like we did, but I just wanted to
Said it
confirm.
would be subject to at least annual review.
Okay, great.
And the question at that point was, now that we've done all this work, what if there's no review needed for 18 months? But we have seen that that's not the case. We've
You say, that'd be a nice meeting not to have.
So for right now, we want to just leave, we've added the main number in addition to the 7,200 number.
Okay.
We don't currently have a proposed additional email address other than that one. Well, we do have, we've just put in there just one that we just made up, which is not active right now, GED@marion.k12.flu.us. And I don't know that that's, I have no idea whether that's an email address that can be used, but that just in as a placeholder, if the board wants to give me the opportunity to be able to correct this, if the district decides to create a different one,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. I think with others, going on down the line,
make a note that that will be something we'll need to review before we publish finally.
And as you said, Attorney Powers, I think more is better, as long as we put in there what statute requires, but giving something a little bit more, I
Yes,
think
sir.
that covers us.
Dr. Gullett, would you agree moving forward that whenever we can have titles of positions as part of the email rather than the person's first and last name, that would be appropriate?
Yes, absolutely. Where we absolutely have to is the only time we would ever include a name.
Okay,
It's preferable not to, because then you have to come back and change policy.
okay.
Yes.
Okay, we're operating really quickly. Could I ask for about a 3 or 4 minute just recess so that we can take care of a couple of things, and then we'll get right back on the ball? Would that be okay?
Yep.
All right.
All right, we will
You guys are working
recess for,
faster and more diligently than we
we will recess for just a short time at 9:38 a.m. Thank you.
Okay.
We are back on with our continued discussion of policy review at 9:47 a.m. Attorney Powers.
Next one we would be dealing with is 8415, that's emergency and crisis management.
Okay,
Sorry, superintendent was going to, on this one, the one that we just dealt with. I believe, Madam Superintendent, there was something you were going to.
5121, yes, I'd like to not have that stricken for Part C on page 14.
That wasn't this one, Terry. It was the one about school choice or open enrollment.
That's taken verbatim from statute.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Give us just a moment to do that.
would you repeat that, please, just so everyone knows that we're,
So policy 5121 on page 14, which is one of 9 of that policy. Item C was stricken, but it shouldn't be because that's taken directly from the policy, from the Florida statute.
so provides a lottery procedure to determine student assignment will remain.
Correct, it's under 1002.31.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, good.
I had a couple of additional questions in that policy. I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
I mean for us to belabor the point. There is one just quick Scribner's error that we needed to have an apostrophe S on something that was being added. If you want me to tell you where that is, I can, Terry. It's technically on page 3, but that's not going to help you. It's in a section called Application and Preferential Treatment. So it would have been earlier in, it's where, up higher, yeah, much higher.
We have an SBA.
Well,
Okay, there we go.
You found it? Okay, so it's on the district apostrophe S website, yeah.
16, okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
See it.
but then I do have one final question, and it's on the last areas of the policy, I think.
We were on SBA 16.
Is that an apostrophe that was missing?
It was just an
Adding an
apostrophe S.
apostrophe, and now she's going to tell us the next one.
Yeah, my final question in this policy is dealing with appeals, which I can give you the new number if that's helpful, if I can find it.
It's 20, SBA 20.
Thank you. I'm looking in the old book,
Sure.
so. SBA 164 was our original. My question on appeals is it currently has, or the new way we have in policy will be that the decision of the director of student assignment is final. I'm curious, board, if we want to give that sole authority to one person, because every bit of this appeal process stops and begins and ends with one person. And that's a question that, of the board.
And it's within our authority, it's within the board's authority to do so, to make that final, just as we make principal's authority final on suspensions.
And I understand.
If not, we need to be prepared to handle as a board all of the appeals that may come forward beyond, in this case, Mr. Ayers, the director of student assignments.
Unless we assign up to the superintendent or her designee. And so that's, which superintendent we all know means designee, but I guess it's potentially even a question for the superintendent. It just feels like there's an awful lot of authority given to one person that begins and ends with one person. And I personally, as a parent and board member, am not incredibly comfortable about an appeal process starting and ending with one person and that person not being the superintendent.
Right, and in this case, the only thing I can speak to that is that the superintendent's designee for these matters would be the director of student assignment. So then, apart from that, you would have to designate the superintendent specifically as the person.
Remind me of the organizational chart, dare I bring that up? Who, Director of Student Assignments reports to Executive Director of,
Ms. Boston Ellis.
okay, Ms. Boston Ellis' department. So I don't disagree with Board Member Campbell. I think it's a lot of authority for one individual, and if that singular individual is has emergency surgery and is out for 3 months, then what?
Dr.
And
Gullett?
God forbid it be during the school choice window. So,
Can it be superintendent or designee?
Dr. Gullett, what are your thoughts?
Let's see.
I'm thinking back to the other policies where we've decided to put superintendent intending designee. That provides as much flexibility as possible. And I'm sorry, I was looking this up, but I think Dr. James made that point about if somebody's out. So,
well, and I think even where it says appeals will be considered by the director of student assignment and the decision of the director of student assignment, I just think the word final is very punitive.
Perhaps, if I may suggest, that in the second paragraph, the decision of the director of student assignment is reviewable by the superintendent, or
Is final
something of
but
that nature.
reviewable, or final,
Or is, well, then it's not final, so I would say this director of student assignment, the decision of the director of student assignment may be reviewed by the superintendent. I mean, that's.
or designee.
Well, superintendent means or designee as a policy
Oh.
definition.
That sounds like you're undercutting a person too, when you kind of say that. It would just be better, I think you just said the superintendent's.
Yeah, because then why would they stop with director of student assignment if they thought that they had a shot, you know?
No, it just strikes me that we've had the same conversation when it comes to principals and their authority over suspensions.
Right.
Because the authority over suspension stops with the principal. It's not reviewable beyond the principal. It doesn't go to the board.
the whole thing.
Now, if it goes into something that's an alt placement or goes into an expulsion or something like that, of course, other resources get involved. But this is for appeals if someone was not accepted for enrollment. Someone, was not either, for whatever reason, it was overcrowded or there was, they weren't selected or whatever the reason was, then that goes to director of student assignment. The director of student assignment then answers to the superintendent, and the superintendent can, of course, write procedures which control the guidelines by which that person acts. They could also, the board could choose to say that shall be reviewed by the superintendent or anything like that. But whenever you've got something where you're trying to allow the due process of someone being able to review or appeal it, but then not continue to move that process up the chain, you have to then ask, where up the chain do you want it to stop? Do you want it to stop with the superintendent? So that you have then, if I understand, my understanding is that there are a great number of these that the director of student assignment or someone else would make a decision on that may not be happy with the decision. And then all of them would have to write letters to the superintendent, and the superintendent would then have to say, well, she'd have to pick some other process and confer with that person and say, well, here's what I believe we should do in this particular case, which could get a little difficult, but it could be more fair too. So,
Could I just offer, leave it as is and say, contesting this final decision may be reviewed by the superintendent. May meaning could, would, maybe, not definite? Or is that, Chair Thurr has wishy-washy eyes, you don't like it?
Well, as a parent, I'd be like, why did you review theirs and not mine?
I hear that.
Yeah, I think this is a very slippery slope.
May I recommend that another alternative that this board may consider is appeals will be considered by the director of student assignment in keeping with procedures established by the superintendent. So in other words, if the superintendent has established procedures on on the appeals process, then the director is simply acting as an executive. He's executing those directions.
I like that. It gives leeway to the department and Dr. Gullett to create procedures as needed. I think if we had Mr. Ayers here, he would probably say that it's a good thing that the decision is definite, because it could create chaos.
What do you think, Dr.?
My question is, I'm looking at the policy, is this required by law? or is this just a guidance? Because again, back to grounding it in statute,
Let me review those statutes.
gotten that far yet on here, but more procedure, less policy on that.
Okay,
Sure,
go
thank
ahead,
you.
Board Member Campbell.
So as sitting here in policy conversations, I know we keep referencing the person currently in that position, but I'm trying to think of it from the perspective of the title rather than the person. Because to your example, perhaps that person was out on medical leave for an extended period and somebody else has to take over in that role or whatever occurs. While we understand what the wonderful person we have in that position's intentions are, it's highly possible that at some point, we will not have the capability of that person, and the direction may actually be different than what the superintendent would choose to do. I'm concerned about putting all of the appeal process authority in one person's hands. I also have a question about taking out a couple of the hardship options. I'm just curious, as board members, I know I have received phone calls from folks before that perhaps another circumstance of hardship has come up apart from a medical need or a law enforcement matter. I know we want to close this can of worms, and I understand that. But there are extenuating circumstances from time to time that perhaps should be considered beyond just the two that are checked here. And so I understand we're trying to, make this policy and ensure that we close some of the gaps and help it be really black and white as to who gets appeals and who doesn't. But some examples, VPK student who has always been at the VPK, I know VPK is a whole can of worms, but the VPK student who is there with the grandmother, who's the teacher, who's the mom, is the teacher, but then that VPK student is actually zoned for another place to go to kindergarten, but their whole family works at the school where they're in VPK. That's not a medical or a law enforcement matter. That is an appeal that, in my personal opinion, if every family member of that child works at some school and they're in the VPK program there, but yet they're zoned kindergarten, 40 miles away and have to get on a bus by themselves, and that is beyond
That would be
this.
professional courtesy,
Well, and to skip beyond.
which is school choice.
And to skip even further beyond that in statute, there's a requirement, and I believe it's already in policy, that we provide a lottery procedure or determine student assignment and establish an appeal process for hardship cases. So
Maybe
there's
that's all we
already
need
an
to say.
appeal process for hardship cases.
And not define what hardship means, because that's what we're here, defining what hardship means.
Find it here.
Which is a procedure.
Because, right, this is defining hardship.
I think we're defining ourselves right into a box.
Box.
Agreed.
I would say
So,
take those out.
from what I'm hearing Dr. Campbell indicate, is that at the very least, D would be another item that she wishes to include within the hardship. I will indicate, though, of course, hardship includes, but is not limited to, those two things, which means that even if we struck C and D, those still are included, includes but not limited to. But we can add, in the board's discretion, could add back C or D. I don't have any input specifically on this matter from the director of school choice, so, but honestly, in this case, adding back C or D would be acceptable, because when you say but is not limited to, I think you're creating an idea that these are the two predominant factors that we would consider. However, we would consider other things as well. So,
Can I ask just a clarifying, I feel like I need to make sure we're on the right track. This entire policy is about controlled open enrollment, which is separate and not the same as school choice.
Oh, it's right there, I see.
So this entire policy is referring to schools that are under 90% capacity. So I think that the examples you've shared, Dr. Campbell, are about school choice.
Not entirely. I'm sorry, I appreciate if you don't mind the dialogue.
No,
The example I'm giving is specific to 8th Street Elementary. So that is not a school that's open.
But if I was an employee at 8th Street Elementary, I would apply for professional courtesy during the school choice window, which this policy would not address.
I can assure you that that has been a sticking point for some employees of 8th Street Elementary. I'm just using that as an example because it's one I had recently of a VPA student there, and they live in Spar, and that's where the student was going to be going because there wasn't space in kindergarten at 8th Street at all. And so that was a decision that was being made.
But that's not controlled open enrollment.
The school isn't available for controlled,
That's what I'm trying to like work through productively is like I acknowledge the example you're giving, and I think that it is a gap in our system, but I don't think that it applies to this policy. I think it applies to a policy that is not this, because this is about schools that are under 90% capacity. That's what this entire policy is about. So I acknowledge that what you're saying is true in fact and needs to be identified somewhere, but I don't think it's in this policy.
okay.
Because 8th Street, as an example, would not fall under controlled open enrollment.
Understood. And then I would further say that then it does need to land in the right spot, and we need to address it because it's been identified as a valid concern.
I think it goes back to Dr. Campbell's point of having a policy or a procedure about school choice. Because what she's mentioning is, I would say that if I work at a school, I guess, I'm just talking through this, in that scenario, I'm assuming that there was enough zoned kindergarteners to take up every single seat, and they would supersede a professional courtesy. And I think that that is kind of just an unfortunate situation. I don't know that a professional courtesy seat should take away from a zoned. If I was zoned for a school and I lose that, there's no way. So it's just a really tough spot to be in.
Yes, because as I was sitting here listening to the very respectful and appreciated dialogue amongst board members as we try to problem solve this, I started thinking forward to, well, what about class size violation? You know, no good deed goes unpunished.
Yes.
Dr. Gullett, Attorney Powers, your thoughts?
Dr. James is correct. I mean, this is about open enrollment. So, and I'm obviously a big fan of more about procedure and less about the policy. So it allows us to be able to address the needs that may change. I mean, because right now there may be room at one school and maybe they won't be the next year, and then you'd have to go back and change policy. So the more we can create procedure around it, the better. I don't know if that answers your question, but I concur with what's been said so far. This is open enrollment.
Attorney Powers?
The issues that are being described in the appellate realm, I can agree with. I do have to stand on the side of thinking that this policy only specifically deals with controlled open enrollment. And so it may take some research to figure out exactly where that applies in situations like the 8th Street situation you're describing, and I'm sure there are others besides 8th Street as well. I mean, I think currently about 1/3 of our students are controlled open enrollment schools.
Oh.
Now, our hope is with construction, every time we build additional facilities, we're going to increase that number by decreasing below 90% a number of those. But, and ultimately, we know the legislature's choice is to try to get us to having controlled open enrollment countywide. So it doesn't matter where you live in the county, you can send your child anywhere. That's the point. In this particular case, I don't see that that addresses this issue here, because I don't see that situation's fixed by a controlled open enrollment policy. However, writing too much into this at this point could be detrimental because we don't know which schools are controlled open enrollment schools from year to year until we get there. And we do, if anything, at least expect some change in that direction over the next few years. So I guess I say all that to say that I don't have an easy and convenient answer for you at all, though I certainly respect each of those board positions here. It's a tough one.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the conversation and understand that it's possible that my specific scenario may not fit in the controlled open enrollment scenario. I understand that. But to Attorney Powers' point just now, that controlled open enrollment list fluctuates. And I've personally known it happen in the middle of a school year, or even in the middle of a semester, that all of a sudden a school pops on that list that we don't have any idea, and then families wouldn't have any idea potentially either. And that yesterday it was available, but today it's not, and that has also occurred. I can give another example, but so that, thus the conversation, thus the appeal process. Do we specify hardship to only be one or two things? Do we say that all appeals only fall with one person, end all be all? And that's the whole gist of this conversation.
I would say that I see no fault, given the language of the definition of hardship, in re-including D, since includes but is not limited to means the same thing that is said by re-including D. It's just perhaps a bit more, clear that, well, yes, if you're including but not limiting to A and B, well, then D is also included. It's not limited to A and B. So.
It's redundant.
Right, but you could indicate that is, if that sort of provided a little bit of stopgap, you could include D, or you could not specify D and still realize that things beyond A and B still exist. I will tell you that regardless of how we do this, I can certainly, and the superintendent can, and I can, have a discussion with the director of student enrollment, or student assignment, and we have a mode within legal where we can flag these to bring them back for the next policy review update. We anticipate that'll be in July or August of this coming year. So we can flag it to come back up again because there may be more to figure out that gets our policy. I mean, I think as this policy exists, it's perfectly workable. However, this by mode of either policy or procedures, because we don't want to put the superintendent on the spot right now to create a procedure for this right now, or for me to try to create a backdoor by policy for this. It's something that we may need to look at based on a complete review of this. How have other counties done it? How have other districts done it? How have we done it in the past? What ways would be the most efficient and effective? So I can put this to come back in July and August for a potential review and update based on those factors. Also, the board may choose to reinstate item D or C or not, because I think that's, though it may be redundant, it also doesn't imply a limitation to only the most severe hardships. Currently, though, A and B give an idea that hardship should be based on something that is significant and tangible, not something that is, because currently our enrollment needs or our limitations are heavily based on there aren't class size types of factors. We simply don't have enough spots, and we are trying to overcome that battle. But as of right now, we do, if anything, need to make it a bit more clear that hardship should be considered in rather potentially extreme areas, and less so perhaps in the areas of maybe professional courtesy or other generalized hardship issues.
Although I would say that in the current situation we are in with employment, it becomes a very real and tangible
Sure.
opportunity for people. It sounds like more work needs to be done on this policy. It sounds like the board raised a few, good points to work through. Is the board okay with this continued work on this particular policy and then bringing it back? Because I don't think we're going to solve this at this particular time.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. I do want to weigh in, though, on what you
Please
just...
do, Vice Chair.
Yeah, what you just shared is that as we look at retention and retainment of teachers, and we know we're, 120 teachers short teachers right now? I don't know how you can say it's not an emergency, and we do everything in our power to retain the teachers that we have. And so it is important to me as a board member that that's a high priority for our staff as they look at the placement of students. And it may not have a place in this particular policy, but it should have a place, and it should be highly considered.
Go ahead, Dr. Gully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Vice Chair Conrad's point, I agree. And there may be hard-to-fill positions that we really need someone, but I'd want to define that so it's not just someone choosing to be there, but someone that we really need to have there. And so as we really look at that recruitment and retention, I think that's a major factor that we need to work through, whether it's directly in policy or in procedure, but agree with that.
Okay, Dr.
And just as I would be interested from our Director of Student Assignments, how many appeals for open enrollment he gets. Because I do not think there's a lot of denials for requests for open enrollment placements. So I think the appeal is going to be attached to a school choice denial, but I think almost exclusively if you apply for open enrollment, you're getting placed in the school you apply at.
Yeah, there's a spot there for
There's a
you.
space available.
Right.
But the availability is determined by the wording in the policy. So there's not a lot of appeals, if any, for open enrollment. There are certainly appeals for school choice, but for this, I think we're in the weeds a little bit, because Dr. Campbell has brought forth a point that I think we need to address. I just think it's outside of this.
Okay. All right, so are we in a good place?
We're in a good place.
Okay.
So my understanding is, would the board be, first of all, decision that we're only going to include A and B, and secondly, the board would adopt this policy as is, with the understanding that my department would be bringing this back during our next update, which was timed for July or August.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm good.
Yes, my only question about that is, would we be bringing policies back in time that they be applied for the upcoming school year? Because while you're saying July, August, this board member's intention would be that we get this done and they are done by August 10th, so that.
Well, even if we began review, even if the board voted on it August 10th, there's a period of time before it becomes, actionable. So I don't know that I can guarantee for open enrollment period, though I thought was
All the time.
Control
Right.
open enrollment's all the time.
Controlled open enrollment is all the time. But I think to Dr. Campbell's point, I think what she's asking is between now and time certain of August 10th, August 12th, I think technically, we want to see a policy or procedure brought to us that is clarifying the circumstances that she brought forth today and some of the other circumstances that we see and how we would navigate employment and employees at certain schools and them having professional courtesy. And so if that means that we have a separate item on a separate day to discuss a policy or procedure about that, then that's fine. I'm fine with that.
If this could be prioritized, that would be my request as well, because it is pretty important and it comes up a lot.
right. Yeah, we won't have any proposed update. This will be a created update. So it'll be one that we would have to get with the director and get with the superintendent and model and try to figure out. So I would, basically, my tendency is to let staff and operations decide what alterations or changes they believe are what they would recommend, then bring them to the board and let the board give the approval or not. I only involve myself in the process really to the extent that it's going to be something that's in keeping with Florida law.
In those conversations, when you need to also include collective bargaining units in those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's something I need to consider, but I don't believe currently that that there's anything under collective bargaining that sort of guarantees any of what we're already talking about anyway. I think that we've probably been wise to avoid that.
I just don't want to be on TV saying we never included them in the conversation.
I'll include them in the conversation about this. Yeah, that's something that I would defer to our team that deals with the conversations with
Okay.
with collective bargaining and unions.
Anything else?
Just a point of information. Mr. Ayers has indicated there have been 0 appeals for open enrollment.
Okay.
And there was a question that came up about his designee, just clarifying that, and if that would be, you, Dr. Gullett, if he were unavailable. I think that is, for this, there's not that many appeals, but in terms of his job as a whole, that's something to be mindful of. Okay.
Okay, so given the fact of 0 appeals, do you still just want this prioritized to bring back over at some point during the summer, which means it might be June that we'd have to have it done in order to get it set up for the new year? Or just let it go smoothly with the next ones?
I don't think it's this.
So, right,
Right?
I think this policy is fine as is, move forward, let's go. But I think what we've identified today is that there's need for additional policy language, potentially in 2 different, we had some conversation about a
Other
couple of different
places,
things.
yeah.
So we need to, just as a board, ensure that if we're wanting things put in policy, and those things could be expedited before some of the things we've identified today, that we just want to make sure that some of these conversations we've had are somewhere enshrined in policy.
Right, or
Okay, so does
procedure,
anybody wanna
and that
put-
they don't just die.
Since I know that now that I will be going back and reviewing this tape, somebody want to put this into clear language as to what exactly we want to have reviewed, what policy we want to have reviewed, or what problem do we want to
Sure.
solve?
And I can tell you, because they were both things I brought up. So one of them is magnet school enrollment. And so we need to determine how that is put somehow into policy, what that looks like, if it needs to be policy, but I mean, currently we have a lottery system for magnet school. It doesn't have to say lottery, but we need to somehow mention in policy, at least authorizing the superintendent to have a magnet school, whatever, enrollment policy, something. And then the other one is the one we've just discussed. If it's controlled open enrollment, it's not controlled open enrollment. It's for hardship cases whenever schools are closed for enrollment, yet we have employee needs or hardship circumstances beyond what these are, because we have such a significant number of schools that are not qualifying for controlled open enrollment. I'm looking at the list right now, if we're going off the FISH report, I mean, that the number is pretty vast of those that are closed. And so, and all of those that are closed are in the predominant area of Marion County where growth is occurring and where folks are living. And so, especially as an employee retention and recruitment procedure, however that needs to look in policy, this board member is just concerned about us not having somewhere in policy what that process looks like, and if we're giving all authority to one person to make those decisions.
Okay, I understand.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, good conversation. All right,
Okay, that was,
Did we finish 5465?
we were just getting over to the emergency.
Yeah, we're just on the emergency one.
440, 415.
Yes,
Or did we finish 5465?
I wanted to bring up real quickly something on 5772. I did not include that in your packet, but I'll show it on the screen here. It was in the original packet. This is our weapons policy. We've gone over this extensively with Mr. McFadden, and also have reviewed in compliance with Florida law. There's a lot of different statutes to control and govern. As you know, everything involving firearms, this is the policy that specifically speaks to weapons as it deals with staff, parking lot, things like that, which currently everything is occupied by the state of Florida. It's the preemption doctrine, which says that the state of Florida absolutely controls everything to do with firearms regulation. Nobody else has any say in it. A quick example for your edification is local municipalities If you are fishing or engaging in a fishing activity or a camping or hunting activity, you may open carry a firearm. So therefore, if you are at Tuscaloosa Park, where fishing is permitted, you may open carry a firearm. Municipalities that didn't like that had tried to overrule it and say, you can't do that here. Florida law said, nope, you're not allowed to. We are the only ones who can make a decision in this, not anybody else. That being said, currently, none of that has to do, everything's totally copacetic with this policy. There was a question brought to me, though, however, about the fact that in our previous policy, which I discussed with NEOLA, and NEOLA made some alterations, the previous policy had allowed for members of the armed forces or National Guard or reserve duty officers or other elected officials to have been permitted also to possess a firearm on campus. And I find no provision within Florida law that permits that. Essentially, Florida law says no firearms permitted within the administration buildings or within the classroom buildings. Now, in a parking lot is an entirely different matter if it's concealed under 790.25, just like everybody else in the state. Somebody has something that is kept within the locked glove compartment, that's a different matter. However, question would arise. Let's say the Supreme Court sends a justice down here and the Supreme Court justice has a security team. Is that security team allowed to possess firearms on campus? We'd have to then say that they are working with our chief law enforcement officer, Mr. Woods, in order to have to be permitted to possess firearms on campus. So, a very long story short, what about, if not a Supreme Court justice, what about other elected officials and things like that? A congressman's security detail or other factors, or members of the school board themselves or members of a county commission or anything like that. Judges certainly are permitted to carry firearms within their courtroom. There's not any provision that I see that permits that among school board members. However, there was a bit of language here that if an attorney general's opinion were to come out on this matter, or the Florida governor clarified the law, I had a proposed addition, and the board is free to accept or reject this. Essentially, my belief is that Florida law specifically prohibits. For example, if you're a concealed weapons holder, you can't come onto a campus with a gun anyway. Now, that also means that if you are a reserve deputy with the Bellevue Police Department, you can't, unless it's in connection with your official duties to the school board, come on campus with your firearm, unless it's in connection with your duties to the school board. SROs could, for example, or if there were other, ROTC officers or someone like that, they could, in connection with their duties to the school board. So the only way that I could insert a phrase here that would fix this would be, can you pull up what I had sent you? Okay. Is as to item D, I am perfectly fine if the board chooses to accept or reject this, but it would be legal. Where not otherwise prohibited by Florida law, the board reserves the right to designate additional individuals, including but not limited to active duty members of the United States Armed Forces, active or reserve law enforcement personnel, elected officials and their security teams, or members of operations staff, I should have said of instead of or, to possess firearms in connection with their security and duties with the Marion County Public Schools. Any such designation will be in writing, state the term of the authorization and legal exemption for the legal basis for the exemption or designation, and shall be deemed to be a confidential security matter in keeping with provisions of Chapter 119 Florida statutes. So that would create the ability that if there was a legal reason by which the board had the right to appoint specific individuals, that the board could do so. Because if the board does not have that right, the very first sentence right at the outset says, where not otherwise prohibited by Florida law. And I believe I've done everything required to avoid confusion in indicating that the designation would have to be in writing, that it has to state the term of the authorization and legal basis for the exemption, and it is also a confidential security matter. So this is for the board's acceptance or rejection. This is the best that I can do, but if there were an attorney general's opinion which decided that there was a particular, or the governor altered law in such a way in which it was not prohibited by Florida law, board policy wouldn't be what's standing in the way of the board making such a designation. It would be only where Florida law specifically prohibits it. So, your thoughts?
Go ahead, Board Member Jay.
This is in an effort to parallel a Guardian program, or?
No, the Guardian program has its, the Guardian program has its own specific reasons.
Yes.
And its own specific, this would not permit, because currently under Florida law, the co-chair and fee Guardian program is specifically required that it be governed by the sheriff, that it be, that the training be carried out, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So this would only permit it where Florida law has, through the Attorney General or through statute, created an exemption
I should have,
some way.
so I should have been more specific. The Guardian program dictates that you have to be on a campus and be a site-based employee to be a Guardian. This would presumably allow for Dr. Gullett, a board member, other members of operations staff to carry a weapon. Is that what this is allowing?
It would, if there is a basis under Florida law for it. Currently, my belief is there is not a basis under Florida law for it unless the Attorney General's office were to speak differently. So this would remove any impediment to us if there was an interpretation that came down from either the Florida Supreme Court, an appeals court, or anyone else that said that it was permitted. Currently, my belief is, this as your attorney, my belief is that it's very, very limited. It's completely controlled by Florida statute. I don't get to opine on, whether you might or might not be able to accept as Florida statute allows. However, cases determine, the case law is interpretive of Florida statute. So if case law tomorrow says that elected officials may possess firearms within their job duties, then you each would be eligible to do so on a campus environment or a facility, provided that you all had a written designation. In other words, it just simply wouldn't be the policy that's standing in your way. Because right now it would be, if case law came out and said that was permitted and authorized, we'd consult, of course, with the chief law enforcement officer of the county and indicate, what do you think about this? And then I'd draft a written designation with authorization and submit that to the board for their approval. So, yeah, that's the way this is right now. It does not entitle anyone to possess a firearm that wouldn't already be possessed or wouldn't be entitled under Florida law.
So this isn't actually changing anything?
Nope. It just, it makes sure that our policy is not standing in the way if there is currently, there's mountains written on firearm possession. Currently, I find nothing that this would change. However, there may be alterations to that policy. They're happening fast and furious, so if the state law, interpretation by case law, interpretation by the Attorney General, in which case it wouldn't be our policy that stands in the way. Now, I will indicate I've spoken with other attorneys regarding this issue as well, and the indications that I've gotten are that this would probably have no effect. It could potentially be confusing, but it also is something that, if placed in policy, would make it clear that so long as Florida law provided for it, the board could designate. And the board would retain the authority to designate, and it would have to be written. So it wouldn't open floodgates for everybody thinking, oh, hey,
Right.
Board approved.
Yeah, the board will approve it after the fact. No,
Right.
it will give us a very specific implementation.
So basically, this clarifies that it's regarding future possibilities. We don't have anything that would get in the way of that.
Right.
Is that what I'm
'cause
hearing?
It could be,
But otherwise, it's status quo for right now?
yes,
Okay.
because it otherwise could take me 6 months to spin up to get the policy update to do that if
Okay.
it were the case.
All right, I understand the intent. Okay. Board?
I just have a clarifying question. Attorney Powers, if you could clarify for me, you said earlier, so if law enforcement came on campus, say to eat lunch with their student, or they showed up after school for an open house, they are not supposed to be carrying their weapon?
They're supposed to be able to carry their weapon in connection with their duties and services to the school board, okay? We actually had this arise in the case of a reserve officer for a department. And the end result was, even in looking in that scenario, that reserve officer there was pick up a student. It wasn't on duty, though currently, certainly we do not restrict or prohibit or limit if there is an officer, and this might be kind of the connection I was looking for, in fact, that you brought this up. Let's say somebody is on duty but is not providing any services at the school, and they show up at the school and they are in uniform and they're possessing a weapon, possessing a firearm, as we would expect them to. My supposition would be, and my defense would be, and I believe this would fall exactly in line with what, if I may speak for him, what I believe that Sheriff Woods would say, is that absolutely, that deputy, when he's in uniform and on duty, has an absolute right. And, and we should be appreciative of that. That being said, what if that deputy is off duty, but that deputy is also, he's an undercover officer who deals with a lot of really bad guys. And so he is kind of on duty at 24 hours. I know when I was a assistant state attorney, they designated me to be, for purposes of firearm possession, I was on duty 24 hours. And so even though I wasn't performing services for the school, an undercover deputy may very well be there to pick up a student and may very well have a specific need to be carrying a firearm as well, especially if someone knows where his child goes to school. The same may be true of a reserve deputy for another department. But unless I found, or if one of those people provided me with, well, here's the reasoning that we use and we believe that is justified, and I agreed that this was justified under Florida law and the Superintendent's Council agreed, we would submit that to the board to specifically authorize that individual. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
We want the good guys to be the ones who are in possession, no one else.
I think I'm one of those proponents of this. I don't think I know I'm one of the proponents of this being in our policy. And you guys know my stance about weapons and firearms and being able to defend yourself. And I think those scenarios that you just gave are very, very valid and happen probably more often than we think. So I think this doesn't hinder us. I think it actually gives us some leeway on doing it. So I would be in favor of this going forward.
And the only changes I would have, you change the of, and I would say possess, and that would probably be weapons or firearms instead of just firearms, because the truth is that would also include a deputy that's possessing law enforcement type pepper spray or something like that. So.
And we live in some different times, guys, anyway. So we're seeing that constantly.
So I didn't mean to belabor the point, but I wanted to explain it since this was something I've created and not something that was specifically submitted, but I'm creating it sort of in a response to and with careful and due diligence to the problem.
Thank you for that, Attorney Powers. It's appreciated. Is there anything else from the board? We're going to go ahead with this.
Okay.
Yep. Okay,
I think our final policy we're on to, is this our last one? We get two more, okay.
two more.
8415 is our next one. This is the emergency and crisis management.
I had a question. So what did we decide about on 5465, what did we decide about the phone number and the email?
I can't hear
We
you.
kept both.
We kept both.
Phone number and email on 8465. The listed phone number is out, and it's going to be We're talking about the one that was listed phone numbers?
Dis-
I don't have it
District
waiting.
number and address, I believe. Is that the one you're referring to from this morning?
Oh,
For the GD.
Yes.
for the GED issue, we're going to continue to use the specific name of the person. We're going to list both phone numbers, and we're going to place in there for now that specific named person's email. And I've put in there a placeholder of GED at marion.k12.fl.us. And if for some reason that's not available, I'll await superintendent staff to tell me what they want to put in there, and I'll put whatever.
Perfect, thank you.
And the address is the address of the department, so.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, moving on to emergency management.
Okay, and these were staff edits on the authorization of the board. There were two issues that came up when we last brought this up. And one was as to state of emergency sort of scenarios or emergency scenarios. And the other was, can you go back down for just a moment? Had to go down with exempt, non-exempt personnel. This was the update, and I want to make sure that I've got the right one. What was this? Okay, so this was the one in which Dr. James brought up the situation of, maybe I should have actually let you best explain it, but the situation in which there were employees who were off duty because of an emergency type scenario. And we have, of course, Florida law that requires us not to pay people in advance for services rendered. And so how does that mesh? How do we make it work? And the reason the policy was first brought up was just because of the fact that we had the personnel who were working during, beyond their 40 hours and sheltering operations. These modifications are what we came up with that would fix the, it would address the board's concerns and would address the concerns regarding any lack of clarity as to whether there was an additional supplement beyond the working at overtime pay for the established rate. And so what you see there is board adopted salary schedules by position. The board authorizes supplemental compensation to those employees who perform duties in direct support of the of district's congregate sheltering operations on days when other district employees are not required to be on duty, in accordance with the schedule for such emergency service as adopted by the board. Both non-exempt and exempt staff members shall receive 1.5 times the established rate in the board-approved schedule for such emergency service for all hours worked during the emergency or disaster in direct support of sheltering operations. In any case, the pay received shall be considered extra compensation and shall not be part of the employee's base salary prospectively. Then we going down here too.
Pause there for a second, though.
Yep.
So to clarify then, if we close school on a Wednesday and our 12-month employees, principals, district leadership, are tapped to do shelter duty, and they work during the day, they are going to get what type of pay when they work during the day on a Wednesday?
If they are not working, well, their pay would be, going back up to that, they would be paid at 1.5 times the established rate. Because we deleted that provision, it says beyond 40 hours in a 7-day period. So they'd be paid at 1.5 times established rate if they're working in direct support of shelter operations.
Paid from the school board or paid from FEMA? Because FEMA,
FEMA takes 9 years.
I know, I understand.
So it would be the school
No,
board.
it's a payment from us.
Yeah.
So, but the reason I'm really berating this is because we have nickel and dimed it 100 different ways. Because if I have day shelter duty on a school day and I am a 12-month employee, you're saying that because I'm not working my principal job, I'm working shelter job, I'm going to get time and a half, not time. And there will be no makeup required for the principal job I did not do while I was doing shelter duty.
Right, and that is in part related to the issue you brought up last time, which is what about, and that's the next section.
Yes.
What about those employees who, during that same time, are simply not working at all? Do they have to make it up, or do they just get paid for it? Well, if they're not working at all, they're not working from home, they're just off, they're still being paid based on what you would
Yes,
you would request.
that's my recommendation.
So, given that fact, someone who actually is doing those duties when they could be otherwise not working is getting.
So the points are going together then. So if I'm working shelter at any capacity, I'm getting time and a half for any of those hours worked
I believe so. We'll review.
because of the second part of this.
Right, and I had discussions with Ms. Morant on this, as well as, and I see him in the audience there, Mr. Blackman. So if anyone has any supplement to add to what I'm saying here, I'd welcome it. But reading through what you see in green there as the potential edits, that's what was come up with by the team altogether.
I like it because it keeps it simple. You know, and we really needed clarification, and we also needed procedure around who actually is being assigned and why, and that they really are being assigned. They got assigned by somebody. They didn't just show up and then, create that confusion.
So I think that point D is in contrast with the narrative that we just discussed, though. It says employees required to work during an emergency, a public health emergency, or disaster will be paid the regularly scheduled wage. Did we not just establish that they're getting paid time and a half?
Well, and I thought, based on what I'm looking at here on the section above, we removed beyond the 40 hours there. So this is,
But I don't think that we should have point D if we're saying that when they're working, or we should say less shelter duty. Because there are people who work who are not working shelters potentially, but employees required to work during an emergency, public health emergency or disaster, actually I changed my mind. I think that they should all be paid time and a half.
Correct.
well,
Whether they're shelter or not.
they're required to work, right, and I think that
Oh,
it sounds like the difference is
I'm just following on.
that those people working shelter duty were the ones specifically that were, and I'm seeing a nod from Mr. Blackman, those working shelter duty, specifically that, was going to be, or in support of district emergency procedures. Let's see, where it says, during the emergency or disaster in direct support of the sheltering operations. So these are the guys running the generators, these are the guys
Yeah, I mean.
at the shelters, whatever the case may be, they're getting paid time and a half. Everybody else who might be working, whether they're working from home or whatever, those folks, superintendent may direct employees to work on-site or remotely in some combination. Those people are paid at regular wage.
I understand. So, but if you'll scroll just a little bit more. So, employee calendar, so I'm still looking for the part that says, if the students don't have to make up the school day, the employees don't have to work and we're still going to pay them. Because that was the premise of me bringing this whole policy forward. Because that has been the crux of the debacle on 2 different occasions this school year. So where is that part? Because it's about the students not having to make up the day. It's not about anything else. Outside of a 260 employee, it's about the students not having to make up the day. And also 260 employees who have to do something like a painter, those individuals who cannot work, and the students are not making up the day, and we are going to pay them anyways. And they don't have to take their sick time, and they don't have to take their vacation time because Jesus delivered a hurricane.
Yep, and I'm looking here, if you look under F, superintendent may determine the number of days allocated and paid under administrative or pandemic leave.
So this takes, I'm sorry to interject, but this takes, that's what I was going to say as well. It takes the authority out of policy and moves it to procedure and gives all authority to the superintendent may determine what that looks like. And so that's.
But if this was already in policy and it was will, then I'm super confused why we had an issue at all. Because we've had this issue now for 2 years that I've been here during hurricane season. And if this has been in policy the whole time, because I have been told repeatedly that the reason we could not pay the employees and the teachers had to work into summer school last year and all of the rigmarole was because we had policy limiting it.
Yeah, that last sentence was not, it initially said if they couldn't do remote work. That was what it initially had said.
If employee can.
So previously, if you didn't have the option for remote work, like you were a custodian, or you were, well, that probably in many of those cases, this might not be the best example, but right, if you couldn't work remotely, you were out of luck, right?
But, correct. However, also, I'm just trying to understand how we got ourselves into such a pickle on, like, I'm thinking 3 different occasions in the last 12 months, all around this policy, when C, whether it's present or not, has nothing to do with it. And if F was will, that would be more.
C was preventing us.
No, it wasn't though, because if I was a teacher, I could work remotely. We proved that during COVID. So why did we make teachers come back and work 2 or 3 days beyond their contract last summer? I mean, am I?
It said employees who cannot work remotely or who do not have work to perform may request a leave without pay or may be placed on a furlough if they do not meet the number of hours for their appointment or position through reassignment.
I know, and what I'm saying is, we made them work the days after students were no longer coming at the end of their contract. For what reason? Because I had been told that this was the reason.
See?
Am I?
So is it because potentially somehow we've defined the work to perform? Is that if you're a teacher, your performance is in front of students, and if students aren't there, you don't have work to perform? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm also asking about the how their contract reads, and if that has something to do with the number of days they have to work based on contract. And so, I mean,
I'm just still not satisfied with this.
I agree, and I completely understand what your questions are, but I'm trying to answer the other question you had as to why we've been in this pickle whenever we have some of this in policy already.
I mean, and I can let that go because that's the past, but like, this does not satisfy to me that if a national disaster occurred tomorrow and we do not have to make up the student day, but by the grace of God, we can come back on Thursday, how our employees can get paid for not having worked, because that is how we should treat people and that is what should happen.
Because this indicates that the superintendent has the ability to set those days and flexibly call those days administrative or pandemic leave under F.
So, but I want that to say will. I can respect that Dr. Gullett would absolutely do it, but I do not need less leniency on making sure that happens. As a board member, this is a big thing for me. I want our people to get paid if the students are not making up the day. if per a natural disaster. And I completely acknowledge that Dr. Gullett would make it happen, but there's no reason for the may, in my opinion. It should be a will. And then I still would like someone to follow up with me for why it didn't work the last 3 national emergencies or local emergencies we had.
So I'm wondering about the final paragraph there under H that talks about employee calendars then, because it did say employee calendars are modified and employees are required to make up the days. So that's there. But now we're going to change that to if employee calendars may have to be modified if employees are required to make up days. So I'm just wondering if some of the question was also in that paragraph after H.
And if they do have to make up the days, because we have hurricane makeup days, then yes, their calendars would be modified. So that is appropriate.
And the best I can tell you is based on my discussion with the team and based on what, I won't put words in their mouth, but based on everything that I saw there in our discussions and and information I'm even getting right now is that C was essentially boils down to this. C was our problem and F will fix it. That's really what it boils down to. So that's the best answer I can give, and anything beyond that is kind of outside my scope for being able to answer the board's question on those factors.
And I agree with that, but I also agree with Dr. James. It should say will determine and not may.
Well, in some cases, the superintendent may not have to determine the number of days allocated and paid under administrative leave because this situation may not have occurred.
Don't you think there would be confirmation, though, that would occur? So maybe determine it needs to be confirmed. The superintendent will confirm the number of days allocated and paid under, because that's what I'm hearing is that it's vague, and all this work was put into trying to fix what was a very blurry and vague and problematic issue, and not just for the last 2 years, for the last 30.
I'm just speaking to my experience.
Yeah.
Under F, I think what you're looking for then is superintendent shall determine.
Shall determine.
The number of days allocated and paid under administrative or pandemic leave.
Is it, and please board correct me if I'm wrong, is it overbearing I just really feel strongly that somewhere it should say, if the students are not making up the day, our employees are going to get paid for not working. And maybe I'm just really whittling this down.
The point that was brought up when we addressed this together as a team also was the fact that, and I don't remember, I'm sorry, it may not have been during the team discussion, it may have been during a board discussion. There are a lot of reasons why we may shut down student attendance that have little to do with an overall emergency, that would have to do with the winds, gusts may be expected to be over X number of miles per hour, which keep the buses from running.
Huh?
But other than that, there's not a state of emergency necessarily to be determined. It could just be simply that there's a tornado warning and it's localized to a specific, quadrant of the county or whatever, but we're not going to send our buses out at risk. So would that be something then that means that everybody in the district gets a day off with pay?
Well, schools were closed just recently because of
Yes.
wind.
Yes.
If that's the case, is that what the board is wanting?
Yes. That's why I'm like harping this so much, because I do feel like there's a disconnect, and I'm struggling because if the whole district closes and we deem that it is not okay for buses to drive,
But it's still safe to have board meetings.
but we could further make that decision, because I would be okay with that. But yes, I would say that if the school district closes operations due to any level of emergency and the students do not have to make up the day, we should pay all of the employees regardless of whether they came to work or not.
They should not have to make it.
So,
And they,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So what is missing here? Like, I'm reading each one of these A, B, C again. What is missing is we have the context of saying that in item B, the superintendent may direct employees to work, okay? We have that. And then we have those employees will get paid, their regular pay. And then we have the superintendent may determine numbers of days allocated, but we don't have anything that talks about the people that may not have to work.
That's my
Right,
whole
so we're
point.
missing an entire section.
Statute doesn't allow us to pay people for work not done or pay people in advance of work done. So what we can do, however, is we can indicate that we are setting it under the superintendent's discretion as number of days allocated under administrative or pandemic leave. That provides the ability that it's no longer now something that is a day that you worked or didn't work but still got paid for, or we paid you in advance for something you're going to make up later, which would cause us a lot of problems. Instead, it allows the superintendent's flexibility to say that these are going to be essentially paid administrative days.
Okay, I understand.
Is there?
I guess could we add, the superintendent shall determine the number of days allocated and paid under administrative pandemic leave to parallel the number of days. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, an additional,
To mirror the number of days students are,
no, because we don't want it to mirror the number of days they're in class. We want it to mirror the number of contract days that are on their contract.
Well, but it also allows the superintendent, and I'm just trying to answer questions as they arise, but God forbid, let's say we had another thing like our last major issue, which was a COVID type thing. There was something like that. In that case, now there's a further distinction between people who are still needing to perform operations regularly and daily and are getting paid for it, as opposed to those employees who are not able to perform those services for a long period of time simply because the school isn't open. Like, say, I don't know, pick a department that has employees whose operation depends entirely upon being physically present. Painters, food service, things like that. Whereas for a long period of time, a month or more, those people may simply not be able to perform any service whatsoever. They're not able to work remotely. They're not able to do anything because it's not the nature of their work. However, there are other staff who will be working every day and possibly twice as hard because they are required to do so. And this would essentially, if we didn't craft this correctly, we could run into the problem where, for example, teachers are now expected to do online education and training and things like that, or there may be other departments who are expected to do quite a significant workload, and other departments who aren't either able to do anything at all, and all would be being paid. And so some employees are then going to be a little, recognizably upset by that because the nature of their job means they've got to continue to perform services, yet they're getting paid. They're not getting paid, or they're getting paid just as someone who the nature of their job does not permit them to perform services. Meanwhile, the people that were in shelter settings, of course, are getting time and a half or overtime. So I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing all these out there for consideration.
I think that is, anyone of us, I think we all, in some capacity, lived through COVID as an employee or a board member or a parent of this district. So that was just the way that cookie crumbled. And that's completely uncharted. I don't think we should create limitations or additions based on something that woulda, coulda in the future, maybe. I don't know. This is fine if this is what the board wants. I just would like to see it most black and white to ensure that our employees, if we have winds over 30 miles an hour again, are not going to have to work from home or come up with some Canvas course, and we don't have to, we can just make the decision. Because the scrambling and trying to figure it out is not healthy for our community. So I would love to just have something written down so we have a standard procedure.
And the only thing I can offer at this point is, unless I had further meetings with Ms. Morant and Ms., I think, and I'm just hearing from Ms. Morant, that this would cover what the board is wanting, that this policy would cover what the board is wanting. So if there's additional need for, I think that what the board's wanting is encompassed by what we've said here. I think Ms. Morant agrees, but if that's not the case and needs additional review, I would suggest at this point that we proceed forward with this policy, which is certainly much more encapsulates what it is that the board is requesting than it did before. And then this be something that the next set of updates we bring this one back for review, since we're going to be doing that with other policies as well.
So I believe what
Maybe
I'm
months down
hearing,
the line, but then that may give us additional time to figure out what our options are for perhaps strengthening it more.
Attorney Powers, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I would just share that I'm hearing loud and clear that the board would like the language to be clear and clarified as much as legally possible, considering all of the nuances. Our current reality is that when there is a threat of a natural emergency, that we just want clear language around that.
And yes, and Ms. Morant had just informed me, she's just communicating with me right now, and just said that it's not just her, it's Ms. Boston Ellis, Ms. Drake, Mr. Blackman, all of us that were on the team talking about this would all concur that this actually fixes what it is you're wanting, but that we can further look for things that may be additionally clarifying.
That's fair.
Because we're kind of on a little bit of an edge there where statute keeps us from paying people outside of certain scenarios. But by giving some discretion to the superintendent to determine the administrative days, that helps us to be able to enact what it is the board's wanting. And I think by making it from, as you suggested, from may determine to shall determine, that means that each time one of these scenarios occurs, the superintendent is not going to just ignore it. The superintendent's got to make some determination.
Yes, I think shall is very appropriate. I don't know if the rest of the board concurs and if Dr. Gullah feels comfortable with that, but that's what would happen.
I do, actually, Madam Chair. I would make that recommendation. It be will or shall. And to all of the questions and comments, I could not agree more. We want to make sure to acknowledge the work of our employees, and every situation is different, and unless they need to be there and do makeup days as per graduation requirements, as we have in the past, we've afforded them the opportunity to do that. So this, agree with Attorney Powers. What I'm hearing from my team is they've all worked on this, and this provides the flexibility the board is discussing at this point.
And I'm more comfortable with the word shall, just because we've had a lot of education around that word. And for consistency.
My only last final thought would be, as we head into next school year, Dr. Gullett, I would, as a board member, would like to know from I guess, student assignments department, how many days we don't have to make up. I'd love to know what that number of minutes or that number of days is, because it seems like we're always like,
Do we have enough?
do we have enough? And then all of a sudden we come up and we figure out we have enough. But it would just be nice to know before we start hurricane season and the school year, what are the number of days?
What's our bank?
For students.
Yes, what is the number of hours already built into our schedule?
For students.
For students. So that if we have a day because of a storm, we're not all wondering. We know.
We can give that to you.
Okay, thank you.
That would really be, that confirmation would really be helpful ahead of the game. And definitely compliments to building in those extra minutes so that there is flexibility there. That's really awesome. Thank you for that. That was one of the early things you did around this issue.
And I will just, by way of explanation, say that one more item that I'm getting here is, as to the board's questions on this policy about past years, the policy previously only allowed the superintendent to grant administrative leave if the employee couldn't work from home. For example, administrators, teachers, and any other employee that can work remotely wouldn't have been eligible for an admin day. So they would have been out. So crossing that line out allows this now to encompass all employees. So.
Good.
Yeah, because people get confused about admin too, thinking, oh, is this just for admin, not teachers? So, again, the clearer the language, the better, the happier the masses. Okay,
Okay,
Thank you.
so we'll adopt
yes,
as
thank you very much.
is there. 8810 is our final one.
All right,
Last one, 8810. American flag and official motto of the state of Florida. Now, we had, the essential basis of this was Florida law already requires that every every school building have posted conspicuously the motto of the state of Florida, which is, "In God We Trust." We had some discussion from there based on a proposal from community members and a couple of board members that we further extend that to requiring not just in every building, but then also in every classroom, which of course gives us another layer of sort of, inspection that we have to make sure it happens. But also perhaps indicates that if you had someone who is an objector to that could, because it's a board policy now, could result in discipline to that individual, progressive discipline if they did not. So the display, if someone, if the board requires it, then the board could require that either the motto or the flag with the motto on it could be displayed in every classroom. We did check also, I think I indicated this to the board, we checked with the warehouse, and they do have on the ability to get the Florida flag with the motto inscribed on it. That's there, "In God We Trust," to be placed in each classroom. It's a standardized 3x5 flag, and as they certainly already have with the American flag. So those are all options for the board. The board would just have to consider the fact that if someone were going to challenge this, they would challenge it on the basis of whether it was compelled speech that we have them post the, "In God We Trust" motto when someone, for example, may be an atheist and doesn't want to have that. So the board had some discussion about that the last time. But I believe that would be also tempered by the fact that because it is the state motto, the same thing that requires it to be posted in all buildings would be perfectly valid for why it would be able to be placed in all individual classrooms. But that would be the board adding an additional layer. So the board certainly could require that it be placed in all classrooms. And currently, Florida law requires it to be placed in all buildings. So if it's placed.
conspicuous place.
Right, in a conspicuous place. So this now gets in a little more detail orientation about whether or not, that the board should take that extra step. So that's up to the board. Then the second portion of this were some discussion regarding the Pledge of Allegiance and whether instructional staff members should be required or authorized. I would suggest, after looking at everything, I pulled some case law, we leave the language as is recommended, that we would be going a step too far on the compelled speech issue to compel that each person actually, say the pledge as adults, if they're adults, whether they're employees or not. The compelled speech issue there, I think, would be more flagrant and would be much more difficult. So if people want to choose to, as I said, we can moderate their behavior. If someone must stop what they're doing, they must, remain silent, whatever the case may be, but that's just compelling that their behavior is appropriate for a particular period. Compelling someone, on the other hand, to actually say the Pledge of Allegiance, that would not be permissible under current state of case law. So that's the background, and I welcome any discussion the board wishes to have regarding that.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. I'm going to ask Dr. Gullett to weigh in on this as far as what would be your recommendation as we go into this discussion. And the reason why I'm asking for that is because I believe it was 2018 when it became the law that the In God We Trust be placed in a conspicuous area. And I want to ensure, first of all, that that's happening. I don't remember that an appropriation went along with this law to have those posters, installed. I seem to remember that there was an opportunity for students that wanted to participate to create them, and then they were placed and then replaced. But, the pandemic comes, time moves on. I know in my journeys around the district since this first came up, I can't say that I see them everywhere in a conspicuous place. So anyway, that's why I wanted to ask you to weigh in on again, we talk about reality. So let's start with the reality of the law that we do have in place and how we're doing with that.
Thank you. Excuse me, Chair Thrower. I always try to clear it before I talk. I actually asked my team to be sure to check each of our schools to make sure we're in compliance. I know at least one that we found that was missing, and so we're working to do that as we speak. And I agree, my recollection, there was no funding for that requirement, so that's something that we have to do as a district.
And I would also say that if we have a Florida flag out front of the school on the flagpole, this requirement is already met by default. So if beyond that, maybe placed inside the building, and that's additional, so.
Okay. Does the Florida flag, is that being flown at every single school that we know outside?
I believe so.
To my knowledge, yes, but we're going to verify anyway.
Well, I think we really do need to verify that as a starting point because that is the current law.
Mm-hmm. I am not aware of any that are not flying. To Attorney Powers' point, the signage, I'm aware that a school does not have it inside, but I am not aware of any flags that are not, but we will verify.
Because, again, we can talk about this as long as we want to, but it's all about the implementation. I want to be good, not just act like we're looking good, and then you find out, well, we're not even following the current law.
Well, I think the way that we have done it is in addition to the Florida flag flying in front of each school, which isn't alone a requirement, but in addition to that, each building is supposed to have, usually just within the administration building, the Florida flag and the motto placed within that building as well. And
Right, that's the
I know
posted
in the
in a
old board,
conspicuous place.
right, and in the old boardroom, we had one that was that's commonly done in every building. So and certainly that's, I guess, relatively easy enough for us to maintain and ensure compliance. The next level of this would then be perhaps now requiring that in every single classroom, that it also be required, or in every room, period. I mean, if you're going beyond those factors, now you're talking about additional requirements and getting a little more, that's within the board's purview to decide.
Thank you. And just to be clear, that's currently not the law.
That's currently not the law, right? Posting it in a school is posting it in a school is fundamentally different than posting it in every individual classroom, because to some degree we give individuals in the classroom creative license to to decorate, to do things. We have, I mean, other schools I read about, Miami-Dade and researching on this, they'd gone all over the place with trying to adopt a policy that permitted some flags and did not permit others, and they were talking about on the basis of whether it was political or whether it was a flag of another nation, and would not permit other flags, and there was a lot of discussion about that, and it actually led to them deciding to withdraw some of their formerly placed policies. I don't know if you've ever been inside the cafeteria at Madison Street. It's wonderful. They've got flags going all the way around the entire, it's a flag for every country, going all the way around the perimeter of the entire cafeteria. So that, I think, is, in addition to the other flags or the other mottos that may be posted throughout the school. The question is now, when you're getting into requiring it in every classroom, do you want to go that far? To what degree is it compelling, a teacher to post that specific motto? And then there's also factual determinations. If you're requiring to put it in 6-inch letters over the entryway of their doorway, some people who may object to that, they may see it as idolatrous, or they may see it as something that doesn't stand within their, but certainly they can't object to the motto on being placed in an administration building, but in an area that is a little bit more of their own purview, they may or may not. So, but ultimately it comes down to this board is going to have to enforce disciplinary procedures if someone does not wish to comply, which will lead to legal action, and that's up to you.
Okay, I have 3 questions, and then I'm just going to, open it to the rest of the board. It's something I've been reflecting and thinking about, evidently. I'm sure it's clear to everyone quite a bit. And my first one is, if we do this, how would it be monitored? My second one is, who would enforce it? And my third one would be, what would be the consequences for noncompliance? So I'm ready to open it to discussion from the rest of the board. Go ahead, Dr. James.
So I want to there are other items from I believe procedural, but it could be policy, correct me if I'm wrong, that are required to be posted in classrooms already. And I'm not sure we have a documented procedure for penalty if they are not followed. But we have a multicolored, Ms. Conrad would remember for sure, a multicolored threat assessment, and schools took it upon themselves to kind of create their own, and it goes by the door or on the bulletin board, and that is posted in all of our classrooms about so that if there's a sub in a room, and what is a different code and what do we do?
You'd hope so. That's a huge safety thing.
Yeah, health, safety.
Okay, so that's posted in every room. There are other, when we had COVID, we had a variety of signs that we required people to post, even though they were vehemently against some of the COVID mandates. We required them to post 6-foot signs and social distancing signs. And so I would argue that if in those instances we were okay with moving forward with posting and requiring those kinds of things to be shown in classrooms, there probably was not a detailed punitive effort if the employee did not comply. I don't remember there being a penalty if you did not comply with posting your 6 feet apart COVID sign.
Wasn't that based on a public health emergency? All of that?
But us posting them, us requiring them to be posted?
That was based on recommendations from the health department.
Yeah, and then those signs got removed when the health emergency was over with.
What I am saying is, what was the penalty for the employee who did not agree?
There was not one.
There was not a documented penalty.
They're also wasn't a choice.
But there's always a choice. I could be non-compliant. As an employee, there could be a policy, and I could be non-compliant. There's always a choice. And then in the use of choice, there is a consequence.
Right, and that's my point. Look where we're already going with this.
No, and my point is, there are times in which we do not have a set consequence, and that's okay. Maybe Dr. Gullett, were there consequences for individuals who refused to comply with posting COVID posters?
I'm not aware of any.
So then I would offer the same thing here. You have a policy, you move forward with posting this poster, and if someone is non-compliant, there is no documented procedural consequence for that individual.
Why have it in policy? Why not just make it voluntary?
Because I think that it sets a precedent and a statement for the work of the school board.
So I'll have a question there, and I'm assuming this is open discussion, I'm sorry. So do we have written in policy a consequence for a school or a classroom that doesn't observe the moment of silence?
No.
But, so I understand we don't have a consequence, but that is the law. And so if they're not, we're going to get into compliance, whatever we have to do. And so I don't know that but I'm using that as another illustration to say that is a defined law about the moment of silence, and it should be at least a minute long, like the law is very specific about that. But we don't have written procedural consequences if that's not occurring.
Yeah, if someone talks during the moment of silence as a teacher, would that then go into kind of an insubordination thing, disrupting the class during when the teacher says it needs to be quiet? Yeah, see.
It's a subjective thing, though we know that that's the law, that we're required to do that, but then what happens in the event that it doesn't occur? We don't have that written into policy as to what needs to be done. That falls on Code of Student Conduct or some procedure manual or something like that, and that I haven't seen the procedure manual, but I'm assuming there are procedures that align with each of the policies that we've approved and what that would look like, because we have a policy about the moment of silence. I'm just using that as another illustration to say we don't have consequences
for every
policy.
And so that's my point is I'm very comfortable as a board member creating an addition to this policy that does not have an immediate and set consequence, because I don't think that there'll be a huge necessity for the said consequence, just like what is the necessity for the consequence for the moment of silence? It's clearly not that evident and needed because we don't even have it. So if people are non-compliant, it hasn't been an issue to rise to our attention. So that is my point, the premise of my point. We have others that are in place that we don't have a set consequence for, and it's okay.
Well, both from a moment of silence perspective, and maybe even more so with the motto perspective, you may also have other members of the community, students, anybody else who decides to report such violations to a principal, and the principal would then, under board policy, if they looked at board policy, have to tell the teacher, go put that sign up. And then if the teacher refused to, then that's insubordination. So my point was never to suggest there needs to be a detailed and outlined consequence. It's just that it's pointless to have a board policy that does not come attached with a consequence. And if there is a consequence to flagrantly deciding not to follow board policy, then, even the board is supposed to follow its own policy. So if there's not some, we're not building in a waiver to this that says otherwise you don't have to do this if, or, we also had, with the things you were bringing up about the COVID or the signs or the 6 feet or the fire escapes or anything like that, those would pass under a different reason. There's a compelling state interest in health, safety, welfare considerations. This comes down to, and I was unable to find any case that would say it was or was not, is this compelled speech? The fact that you're requiring someone to put this up in the classroom when they may not agree with that speech. Well, this occupies a unique position because it's not just a statement of a specific religion or state-established religion. This is actually the state motto, and along with, I'll point out, one of the, it's got a long-standing history as in the U.S. as well. It's on our money, I mean, it's like e pluribus unum,
It's in a lot of conspicuous places.
Right, so those factors would tend to cut against there being a problem with just neutrally saying it's required to be in the classroom. However, the argument, if someone were disciplined over it and decided this was the battlefield they wanted to die on, the argument would be, I'm going to take this all the way and force you to discipline me, or I'm just simply not going to comply. And if you do discipline me, I'm going to take this as far as I possibly can as a free speech issue or a compelled speech issue. So is that a battle that we want to get into? Or do we want to provide these to all classrooms and recommend that teachers place them? And that's something for the board to consider. Is the sign compelled speech or is it not? I don't know. It's not really a distinction I'd like to get into. I'd love to provide every classroom with a flag to place as they see fit in the classroom and a poster with "In God We Trust" if they'd like to place it up there, and encourage them to do so. But if someone wants to have a strong opinion in the opposite direction, they don't want to, that's really up to the board as to whether or not we want to compel them to. When you compel them to, that will result in if you're compelling someone to do it, it almost makes people not want to do it, and makes people want to, draw divisions and draw sides and say, I'm not going to do it because you're forcing this other teacher to do it too. And I don't know, that it's perhaps, especially given the relations with your employees, those are all considerations for the board to make about what you want. And what the purpose is, and whether the purpose is worthy of the goal. So that's certainly the board's decision. Other than that, I would just say that the only strong opinion I have would be a strong legal opinion I can come up with, is as to the latter portion that we talked about with the Pledge of Allegiance, that we really need to stick to that kind of closely, because that's much more highly regulated. Compelled speech there, where you actually compel someone to give an oath or to participate in that, is a little more difficult.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. And I guess I'll say, what I love about this conversation and what is so positive, and it really lifts my heart, is that, we have someone in the community that is willing to, to pay for these signs and take the financial burden off of anybody that wants to display one, in their classroom. And I think that is, absolutely wonderful. A great way to lead people to faith is to offer, not mandate. That's my opinion. So I'll be quiet now. I know I said that before, but I'm really going to do it now.
So I'll just say that I appreciate that opinion, but I think that I want it to be a requirement. I want it to be a requirement as a board member, and I believe that the donor is only willing to donate if it is a requirement. I do have a comment about the Pledge of Allegiance, but if it's okay with the board, I'd like to finish this part of the conversation.
That would be my intent.
Okay.
For me, I think the law is specific, states where we should have it at, and it should be placed out there. I just have an issue when we compel or require people to do something that they may not necessarily want to do. I think we ought to afford them the opportunity to put it in their classroom. They have that right to put it in there, but I don't want to put our staff in a position where we're going to be punishing them if they choose not to. This is our country. This is our country of choices and options and liberties, and to compel them or to be required to have to do this is kind of where I'm not there.
Thank you, Board Member Cummings. Dr. Campbell or Vice Chair Conrad, I know you guys have been sitting by relatively quietly.
Yes, I'm struggling a little bit, I'm thinking about all the things that we already do as a teacher that you may not want to do. There's a lot of things we do that we're required to do. And when I look at this, and I think about living in America, living in the state of Florida, the money that I choose to handle every day, I think this should be a requirement. I think it should be posted in each of our classrooms. I think it's important for our students to know, recognize the American flag and the Florida flag, and what better way for them to see it every day as they enter their classroom. We have lots of things on and off, at least why I've been in education, that we've asked our teachers to post in their classroom. One is their student pledge. You know, most of our schools have a pledge that they post. And when I think about the importance of the things that I've been asked to post, this is more important to the development of our young people than anything that's been put before me as a lifelong educator and learner. So, you know, my hope is that our teachers understand that and go into it with that thought, that I'm not trying to change, as a board member, their beliefs, but the exposure to both flags and the message and the motto that we have in the state of Florida is visible to them, and it's recognizable. That doesn't mean I'm teaching a lesson about God the Father, but I'm acknowledging that it is our state motto.
Thank you, Vice Chair Conrad, and I think I said a couple weeks ago the very same thing. That would be a great compromise, in my opinion. I love the idea of having the American flag and our state of Florida flag in the same classroom. It sounds like we have them on hand or could get them, and who knows, maybe somebody would be willing to donate for that. So that's something that I said it a couple weeks ago, that I could get behind that all day long. Dr. Campbell?
Sure. This is one, obviously, that we've all been pondering a bit since our most recent conversation. I know the last time the conversation arose, we all received comments from folks from the other side. I just counted back 17 emails I had saved on that. It doesn't matter. People are going to agree and disagree with the decisions we make all the time. That's nothing in comparison to the school start time emails. I keep all my emails, so it's interesting to go back and look in folders and see what those are. What I want to say is we're in an interesting position as school board members in the state of Florida. And so I've been looking and seeing, because state of Florida made this the state motto, and we're the only state in the union that has it that way. So that is an interesting dynamic as a school board member in the state of Florida that, granted, it's not in the constitution of the state, but it is still essentially a state designated motto, but we agree to uphold the laws in the state of Florida in addition to the United States laws. And so this one is interesting to me. I appreciate the donor intent, and I appreciate the conversation that the school board is having on this. I believe, for an educational moment for students, if we were to place "In God We Trust" in our classrooms, I don't believe it just needs to say "In God We Trust," period. I believe it should say the state motto of Florida is "In God We Trust," or something to that effect, which we were discussing the flag. And I appreciate that the flag does have "In God We Trust" on it. But depending on how the flag is displayed, if it's hanging, as it is here, you can't see that. And you can't see that depending on how it's hanging. So I appreciate all the aspects of the state of Florida, first of all, recognizing this as a state motto, that the United States has recognized it as a state motto, and that the state of Florida has also enshrined it on the flag itself. If I were to see that this be put in policy, I would recommend that the posters themselves actually indicate that "In God We Trust," not just with the flags, but that it actually is the United States and state of Florida motto states, "In God We Trust." And I would be comfortable with that information solely because that is fact. And that is educational fact, that can be taught upon fact. There can be educational lessons that are taught as to say when the state adopted it, we're the only state in the union that has it. I mean, there's education behind that. And so I could be behind that if, in fact, the poster said, the United States and the state of Florida motto states, in God we trust. So I say as state of Florida, board members in the state of Florida, we're in a unique position because we have adopted this as the state motto. If we were in Tennessee, where I was educated originally, it's not there. Agriculture and commerce, I looked it up over here. Agriculture and commerce is the state of state of Tennessee motto. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that has nothing to do with this conversation. But I just find that we are in a unique position because it is an educational moment in addition to being a part of the state motto and the state flag itself. So that's where I stand. If, in fact, we were to enshrine it in policy, which is what we're discussing today, I would recommend that what we place in classrooms actually is educational.
Chair.
Yes.
And thank you, Dr. Campbell, for that suggestion, because that would make more sense to me. Because now it's to me, it moves away from being something other than what people want to make it to a lesson where you're stating that this is the state motto. You should recognize the state motto. This is our state flag. You should recognize the state flag. This is the United States flag. You should understand the tennis. You should know how many stars and stripes and all that stuff that we should learn. It's a lesson that's more that's entrenched with this posting in the classroom versus us just putting it there for whatever reason, whatever statement. I can get behind that. But I do also still have the question is, and I think Attorney Powers is stating it very clearly, what we're making this into a policy. What policies have consequences, and what's going to be the consequence if the policy is violated? I need to understand that piece because that's going to be the next piece that's coming down behind this if this becomes a policy.
I think he said insubordination. I mean, that would be the first step.
Well, I mean, it would depend. I mean, if you have somebody who's just in there doing a random classroom inspection or a random, classroom observer or something, writes a letter to the principal or writes a letter to the teacher, and the teacher just says they're not going to, well, then that's not insubordination if the teacher tells that to some other parent. But then if given a directive, by your superior, I think that the only thing, if you don't follow that directive, that you can say that it is insubordinate behavior. And the question then becomes, in some areas, is that going to be enforced in some situations and not others? And differential reinforcement runs into some problems there as well. And the fact is also, people, I think you may be baiting yourself into positions where conflict is going to be involved because, first of all, people are going to be questioning, well, certainly voluntarily, as of this moment, without any further board action, as the state motto or as any presidential speech or as any Supreme Court decision, anything else, any historical U.S. statement can be placed in the classroom. If somebody wants to place a speech or a portion of a speech by a civil rights leader, they don't need special permission. Civil rights leaders, U.S. senators and congressmen, presidents, those quotes can all be posted right there in the classroom without further permission. And voluntarily, any teacher can do that. Now, a history teacher may see that to be more of a almost necessity than someone who, say, teaches calculus may simply not think much about it. But they're certainly permitted to anyway. Now, we would then run into, do they get to, if they're going to be required to, then the requirement would be under what I heard from the board today, that it say this is the state motto that says that. But they can place that without it being there voluntarily as well. And you're going to run into the problem of people, I mean, that's just, I would anticipate this runs into that problem, and that's something I just want to steer you as a board away from.
As a board member, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with fighting that fight if that fight comes to our door.
So when there's a teacher that comes by and says, I want to put in my classroom by any means necessary, and we know where that came from, that's going to be okay. across the district.
It already is.
It already is.
Okay, so, but because we're gonna make it, you know there's gonna be somebody that's gonna come along and say, you know what, I'm just gonna do it for the hell of it.
But there's always going to be someone. There already is someone.
Okay.
I can't name that someone, but there already is someone. There's, that already exists.
Like I said, I can get behind it for the educational purposes.
I can agree with Dr. Campbell in adding the words, I mean, we were given something from the community member. So, adding the words state motto or state and national motto, or whatever that language is, I can get behind that. I don't exactly remember exactly the word you said, but.
Sure, I mean, I would say it would actually be at the top. So I think that it would say, the United States and state of Florida motto states, "In God we trust." And then if we want to have the flags on it too, great. But that's how I would be comfortable with it. I wouldn't want it to be below the words, because I think that, again, changes the context and the meaning of what we're trying to, from an educational standpoint.
I would say the flags should be on there because that's the educative piece. And, you know, there's also, I would point out, no policy right now that is not allowing any of this. You know, we don't have anything written in policy saying that they can't do it. You know, we're just silent on it. So I think the best thing I've heard so far, I understand about the furling of the flags, it's all and how they're displayed for what you read. I get that. I think what you've shared is a very good idea.
Is it possible to ask the community member who's willing to donate it to come forward and make sure that we're in alignment or in agreement? Is that something that we can ask? Because as a board, I don't want to make a decision reliant on a donation from a community member and then.
Sure, I get that. And then the question becomes, you know, if this is something that a community member wants to donate, do we really need to have it be in policy? So anyway, but yes, I really appreciate the community member that's here and that has been here and has been waiting to address us. So if you would like to come forward, sir, please do. Good morning.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Frankly, I'm very thankful the way the conversation has gone. And what I'd like to do is take about 3 minutes, because I know that's my limit. I timed this out, and I think I'm at 3 or less.
We sure know who you are, but if you would please state your name for the
I
record.
apologize. I'm Brad Dinkins, and the address is 101 Northeast 16th Avenue, Ocala. I just would like to give just a little bit of background information on why I've made this recommendation as to a possible policy addition. First of all, the motto is popular, it's patriotic, it's historical, and it's legal. Including Florida, multiple states, about 18 states, have passed legislation to allow or require the motto to be placed on the walls of the schools and/or classrooms. And incidentally, Tennessee is one of those. In God We Trust is posted on city, county, state, and federal buildings. It's posted on our coins and currency. And even if you get up behind a Marion County Sheriff's car, you'll see In God We Trust is posted on our cars as well. Related to our acknowledgement of God in schools is our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, which states that we're one nation under God. Also related to that is our national anthem, which includes these words, "And this be our motto, in God is our trust." The motto has been challenged in courts across America and has always been defeated. In fact, the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit stated the motto has nothing to do with the establishment of religion, and that's been consistent throughout the court appeals, the court situations. Secondly, it's meaningful, helpful, and needed for our students. Frankly, the motivation behind me wanting to do this is for our students. And I understand some teachers may disagree, but I tell you what, my heart's for these kids. To me, the focus of the motto is to be helpful and meaningful to our students. And let me just share a little bit about that. Many of our students are growing up in dysfunctional homes where they see or experience mental, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. There's the pain of divorce and abandonment and broken promises. Some live in what you might call war zones. As a result of the hurt, anger, and abuse, they suffer depression, anxiety, mental and emotional illness. Many feel lost, and some of them experience suicidal thoughts. In the schools, some experience discipline problems, poor grades, and poor attendance as a result of some of these complications in their life. Many are looking for love and acceptance that they never received from a parent or at home, and they're looking in all the wrong places. However, if they read a poster that says, "In God we trust," perhaps that will be a seed or a message that they can turn to God and trust Him for help, for direction, for hope, for safety, for answers, for healing of a broken heart, for the love that needs to fill the emptiness within. And if one student, just one student, will be helped because of their trust in God, then maybe they will tell their friends. And even more people may decide to trust in God also. If this happens, grades should go up, less discipline problems, and attendance should increase as well. Students will become more mentally and emotionally healthy, and much more. For all the potential benefits of the students, I would like to ask you to approve a policy that would require "In God We Trust" on a poster in every classroom, and if desired, any other room or building on the campus. Let's remember, no student will be coerced into looking at the poster or to trust in God. There will be no coercion. Also, the motto is not coercing anyone to trust in any particular God, as the student can trust whatever God he so chooses, as there is no religious preference in the posting of the motto. In fact, atheists and agnostics have a right to read the motto or to not read it, just as they have a right not to pledge allegiance to the flag. Of course, that's with an opt-out. And finally, to avoid any cost to the school, I would like to pay for all the posters. And so I don't know if they've been passed out as it's really just a sample. And frankly, I like the suggestions that have been made about putting on there the educational side of it, lesson side of it, that this is the state and national motto, something to that effect. And so I thank you all for your time. I thank you for your hearts for the kids, because let me tell you, many of us y'all are probably aware of what's going on with these children. I've been going to the juvenile home, I may have mentioned to some of you, for over 6 years. And I see the results of the brokenness of the family, the abuse, the physical, the abandonment. I'm working with a young man right now that's been in 25 foster homes, and he's been in the public schools. For those of you that haven't been out there, you ought to see all the kids that are getting off the bus at the Heart of Florida Youth Ranch. And they're coming from very difficult situations. So, listen, I've experienced God in my life. I probably wouldn't be here. There's been suicide in my family. There's been overdose of alcohol and drugs in my family. There's been mental illness, manic depressive, bipolar. I came from a dysfunctional home to a large degree. And so as a result, my heart goes out to these kids. So, yes, again, a teacher may not want that put in there. But I'll tell you what, and this may be out of order, but I believe that the Lord really does want to get into those classrooms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dinkins. Thank you very much. Okay. Dr. Gullett, I know this is a decision that the board will make regarding a policy, but I would like to get your input on the operational side, because it'll be your team that will be tasked with implementation.
Certainly. Madam Chair, members of the board, I agree with what was shared earlier. It's already allowable, and certainly I would encourage posting of the signs, even if the board doesn't have a policy. But I do agree that we'd have to have progressive discipline we would be addressing, right, if someone didn't comply. But I do believe that many, if not most of our employees would welcome this and put this in their classrooms, even if it's not required. I think most would anyway.
Thank you. That's a testament to our employees and our staff, and I can't imagine that anyone would be doing this work if they didn't truly have a heart for kids, especially these days. Attorney Powers, was there anything else you?
I would just like to point out that I really like the board's indication of some element of the historic procedure and the historic reasoning, that perhaps even further than just stating that is the motto of the state of Florida. Certainly it can be a short historical statement of when this motto was developed, or when the country was founded, or how it became Florida's motto, or whatever. There can be, a brief paragraph statement that's decided, at whomever's discretion, that's decided as to a paragraph to go with this. I believe that gets you even closer to finding a compelling state interest. Certainly the teaching of history is outlined under 1003.42 as a compelling state interest, and I think that makes things a lot smoother, easier, and clarifies the legitimate purpose as well. So, having "In God We Trust," maybe a picture of the flags, but also having specifically just a brief paragraph statement, non-denominational, not religiously based, but simply that just indicates the history or the motto of the flag of Florida, would certainly be what I would want to see if someone chose to challenge that.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. And Mr. Dinkins, thank you for coming forth and offering this to the community. I think this is a great opportunity for us to enhance some history and to enhance some classroom behaviors and help some things to get better. I like the idea, and I was going to say the same thing, with what Dr. Campbell suggests as far as this is our state motto. Mr. Dinkins just gave you that this is on so many states have adopted this. In God We Trust motto. It's on police cars. It's on law enforcement. It's on money. As I was sitting here, I pulled out some money in my pocket to make sure that it was on all the bills, but it's on there. And so when you add those facts to this, it gives, to me, more significance and more relevance to that student that's saying, in every area of our lives, whether they know it or not, that God is in there. God is in there. Now, that may be going a little bit to the religious side. I'm a Baptist preacher. That's fine. That's fine. But I think that this is a greater opportunity to help some people that may not have had an encounter. And I love the idea of the facts being there, but I also love the fact that when you make it educational, people don't want to argue with it when it's educational. They come up with reasons to argue with it when they think it's something else. So I like the part of us making it educational, giving those facts, making sure that everyone knows this is our national money, this is our everywhere, this is our state motto, this is how it came to be, and it becomes a lesson, and it actually generates more questions for students, I think. I agree. It
opens conversation, and it gets kids asking why, and it gets them thinking, and I think that, that's all very, very valuable. All of it is very valuable, and I really appreciate the conversation and the depth that we're going into as a board, to figure this out. Dr. James.
What I was going to ask, because I think as a board, we would have to create a sentence or something down under A for in the classroom, or somewhere above what's shown right here, we have to add some kind of language or a sentence to reflect the requiring of a poster being posted. And then I would ask the board if we could give discretion to Dr. Gullett to work with Mr. Dinkins on the specifics that the board has come to consensus on about a statement about the motto, and potentially under the flags indicating, a 3 or 4 sentence about the history of the flag, or I can get behind all of that. So I think my request to the board right now would be, what language are we adding in for the posting of the poster? That sounds redundant, so I'm sorry about that, but.
Poster posting.
By maintaining that language purposefully vague, the official motto, State of Florida, In God We Trust, shall be displayed in a conspicuous place in all classrooms in the district and in each building used by the school board. That means that, for example, you may.
Oh, sorry, I was completely looking beyond that. I apologize. Yep, it's right there. So I think we're good. I'm sorry. I was thinking it was above. So I'm sorry, I had a
And it
moment.
wouldn't necessarily be limited to just this poster. I mean, certainly there are probably plenty of teachers right now that have their own version of In God We Trust up there with the
Certainly.
Constitution behind
Yes.
it, or like my bumper stickers or something like that,
So then I'm on board with the language that's written into the policy right now, saying that it would be in a conspicuous place in all classrooms in the district and in each building used by the school board. And then I'm comfortable giving discretion to Dr. Gullett and Mr. Dinkins to finalize what that looks like, and then moving forward with the donation as needed to fulfill a request.
A question, as far as the donation, so this is a one-time donation. What happens when these posters wear out? How does that fit into our budget?
We're talking a lot of classrooms.
Yeah, I have been in communication with Mr. Dinkins about the number of classrooms as well as that. So, Mr. Dinkins, if you want to share.
Yeah. From what I remember, there's 2,541 classrooms, and we'll be glad to fund the replacement of them as well.
Okay. And Mr. Dinkins, while you're there, are you understanding where we're going with this? Are you in agreement with that?
I like it.
Thank you, sir.
I'll just tell you this, and this is no joke. This is an answer to prayer. What just took place in front of here, I'm just so thankful.
He does answer.
So grateful.
He does answer prayer.
Yeah.
We know that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is there anything else from the board? I know, Dr. Campbell, you had mentioned about the educative elements, and so that's not included in this.
Certainly, I mean, I think that will be something that can be handled in procedure, and what the actual, how it looks and what the size of it and all of those parameters, and if it's framed or just a poster, all that stuff needs to be handled in procedure. I do believe that I would recommend that there actually be some kind of lesson of some sort that created in a civics class, or in, civics has its own standards, whatever. So somehow that there could be some element of educational lesson that is taught at some point as to why it's even there. I think that would be incredibly valuable in each classroom, whatever the grade level, whatever the, because in a math class, it can be talked about the currency. And, so we can bring it to some relevance in every single classroom. So I find the value of the educational element of it. And while other states have adopted resolutions or policies or what have you to have the national motto posted in wherever their places are, the state of Florida is unique, that it is our state motto. And that is not, every state does not have it. We are the only state that has it as our motto. Other states obviously have said we want to post the national motto, but we are not only just posting the national motto, we would also be posting the state motto, which happens to be the same.
So, question. So this is falling under the display of the officials motto of the state of Florida, correct?
Yes.
And the Florida flag?
Yes.
Well, we're not displaying the Florida flag. We don't have a requirement to
Have a
display the
requirement for the
Florida flag.
So our purchasing department has indicated that we certainly have the ability to, we have some.
We would have to
certainly
fund it,
ability
though. I mean,
to provide those to any classroom that wants them.
Okay, do we need to state in here out the size and, I see
They're
that?
3x5 flags.
No. I
Oh.
see when we talk about the American flag, we talk about the size of the flag and all that stuff. But for this poster, do we need to?
I think leaving it vague and allowing Dr. Gullett to make those decisions would be the most seamless, least bumpy approach.
Right. I agree, and I love the context around it. You know, I think there already is a statute about, the historical context of global, terrorism and communism and, how people suffered. There's just a lot of opportunity to thread this in so that it does provide context, because otherwise it's just something there hanging on the wall that nobody really talks about. If we're going to do this, we want it to be alive and relatable to kids. That would be something that I would think would be important.
Madam Chair, and just going back to Dr. Campbell, so we're looking at this, basically this, I guess it's the last sentence of this, where it says the official motto of the state of Florida, "In God We Trust," shall be displayed in a conspicuous place in all classrooms in the district and each building used by the school board. Can I offer a suggestion? And this is just based on what Dr. Campbell has suggested. Can we say for educational and historical purposes, the official motto of the state of Florida shall be displayed in a conspicuous place?
I can get behind that. For educational purposes.
And historical.
For educational and historical purposes, comma, the official motto of.
That's what I was looking for.
Thank you.
You guys are making me plenty happy on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to make us, I don't like lawsuits. I don't like lawsuits at all. So, thank you.
Well, I don't mind lawsuits if we're going to win them.
I can get behind that.
Why would we dive into something that we're setting ourselves up, to be embroiled in something? We need to be smarter than that, and that's what I love about this board. We're willing to take the time to talk things through, and it's not about the usual buzzwords of offending people or this or that. It is about the meat of meeting our kids' needs. That's what I feel like I'm hearing from this board, and I really appreciate it. Dr. James?
I just want to touch on the pledge, and then I promise I'm going to be done.
So we're done with this. We have the direction for our superintendent.
Yep.
Okay, we're good. Okay.
So I want to go back to the conversation I remember Vice Chair Conrad brought up, and I had spoken of, I remember the most about is, I want our adults on our campuses to have to stop what they're doing and be quiet during the pledge. They don't have to say the pledge. They don't have to participate. But they need to stop and acknowledge the Pledge of Allegiance. That's what I would like, and I'm not sure that that language is representative in what is written right here. I'm not saying they have to participate, but
I'd see where you're going with that. Let me ask, because I don't know. During the regular school day, when the moment of silence is observed, where is the pledge in relation to that moment of silence? Is it standardized, or is it vary by school?
It's going to vary by school. It's usually morning show, usually students are somehow a part of it, but not always.
and into first block, my most recent school placement, it was the end of the first block before we transitioned to second block, and it was done from a school leader over the all call. So not even like the announcements, but like an all call.
And during that time, during that moment of silence, are staff asked to or required to observe the moment of silence as well? Not continue discussion and everything else? Okay.
That's correct.
Then I think, and I assume that's within either a verbal or written procedure. But that's what is the expectation is, at least of the staff. In the same way, I believe communicating the expectation that, of what you're talking about there with the.
But then I go back to the same argument we had 30 minutes ago, because it's not happening. It is not happening. So where's the consequence for that? Like if that's, it's not happening. So I'm just confused by how, that's what I'm struggling with, because it's not happening. And I want to see it, why I want it in policy is so that there is strength in requiring silence. You do not have to participate, but strength and requiring silence and observation.
And what would be the
Or
strength?
participation.
Instructional staff members are authorized to lead students in the Pledge of Allegiance at an appropriate time each school day. All staff members are required to observe by silence, or are required to, whatever that word is.
Respect.
So what happens, I'm just thinking outside of I'm not against what you're saying. What happens when you have, at the time that this pledge is going to be going forth, you have staff members in the cafeteria?
Yeah, well, and we talked about, and Chair Thrower brought up a phrase, and refresh my memory what the phrase was. It was,
As they are able.
as they are able. And it was the phrase that would identify that obviously if you are doing something that inhibits your participation, as they are able was included to indicate that those individuals are not able. But when it goes and you're in the lobby of an elementary school and everybody's just doing the do, and the Pledge of Allegiance is happening and no one acknowledges that the Pledge of Allegiance is even happening, I have a problem with that.
What do you think of all students and staff members shall be required to halt other activities during the presentation of the pledge?
As they are able.
As they are able.
Because if you're directly supervising a student that's visually impaired, or that is about to run somewhere.
Or someone has a medical event and you're in the midst.
Yes.
Or you have them on a
No.
changing table.
I like that phrase, comma, as they are able. I could get behind that.
Dr. James, it shows a type of reverence for the moment and the pledge. I completely get it.
Yes.
I just want to make sure
To the
that we're
degree practicable?
right.
Yes. Okay, I got as they are able from church, please stand. But yeah,
What
practicable
it means
sounds
is if you
legal.
wanna
That
challenge
sounds,
it, you better break out the dictionary.
All students and staff members are required
that's
to
right.
participate.
No, all staff members and students shall be required. All staff,
Students.
say students and staff members.
Students
All
and staff.
students and staff members shall be required. Nope, you're up one. Yep, over. Delete the R. Yep. Shall be required to halt other activities during the presentation of the pledge
And moment of silence.
and moment of silence.
Or no.
Is that in that?
That's a different
not in your-
policy.
Okay, that's a different
Policy.
policy.
Yeah.
So you would want to put it in that.
To the degree practicable.
Yes. Further, there, again, is an educative piece to this, that when an employee is applied for employment with Marion County Public Schools, and it's part of their new employee orientation, expectations, what we stand for, our district culture, that would be the time, I would think,
Yeah,
to share these things.
slide in the new hire presentation.
Correct. This is, to me, it's very important to me. It's not about looking good, it's about being good. We can hang up anything we want to, but it's the implementation.
Do you prefer, during the presentation of the pledge, to the degree practicable, or do you prefer shall be required to halt other non-essential activities? I guess non-essential is broader definition, so is that not as good? Okay, leave it as
Those
is.
copies for Miss Johnson for first
That's
period
very-
are
I
very
gotcha.
essential, so.
Yeah, I got you.
Right. It's essential that I know time I shoot.
All right, halt other activities.
I'm trying to find the moment of silence policy, sorry, it's,
I appreciate the board allowing this conversation to occur.
We allow all kinds of conversation to occur that lasts for a while, but it's worth it because we get somewhere.
Pledge to the
To the degree practicable.
Dr. Gullett, you think that you can get behind that?
I completely agree.
That
Yes,
it could be cross-referenced
yes,
to the other
absolutely.
policy.
I want to say to the board, thank you guys for talking this one out, all of these out.
Yeah.
I'm not against any of them.
Correct.
I just don't want to run into walls that we don't have to run into. And I think by us having the conversations, I think our staff appreciates us having the conversation. And I think our staff will be very supportive of all what we've done here today. Classroom. I don't anticipate there'll be many, but if there are, I think the majority will be in agreement with what we're doing.
Very good. Thank you, Board Member Cummings. That's, I think, the intent.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other further public comment on this policy? Because I think we're at a good point, right?
Very good point.
Okay, we're at a very good point. All right, hearing none, we will wrap up our policies discussion and move into comments and concerns. Anything else from legal at this point?
I think you've probably heard more than enough from legal today. I don't have anything additional except thanks to the board and thanks to my paralegal for having put so much work into the policy editing that we do here today, and as well as the staff who met with teams to come up with each of these sections. Each of these requires a lot of work and requires a lot of people with a lot of heads together to communicate all of the what-ifs. The same discussions you were having around the board table today are held around nearly every department's table with all of the policies that we deal with on these issues. So they can put their heads together and come up with what areas need further discussion, what areas, what do we mean by this, what do we do now, what do the districts do, are we complying with the law in this effect? So there's a lot of team effort going into work here, and we very much appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Powers, and likewise. Anything from Mr. Gregg?
No, ma'am.
Thank you for sitting in with us today. It's always good to see you. Dr. Gullett?
Thank you. Just a few brief items. I do want to also thank my team, including Attorney Blackman. They've been working really hard on updates and providing recommendations to the board. I also want to provide the late-breaking news. If you haven't already heard, the Marion County Board of County Commissioners approved this morning forwarding to the Supervisor of Elections to place on the referendum question on the November 5th, 2024 ballot for the half-cent sales tax for 10 years. So that has been moved forward. Also, the Board of County Commissioners voted to schedule a public hearing for impact fees on March 5th. And there will be they scheduled a joint workshop with the school board for March 27th. And times and locations are McPherson at 10 a.m. and Livestock Pavilion at 9 a.m. respectively. So we'll provide you something in writing as well, but those are the latest updates from this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett. And to confirm, would the vote on the impact fees occur March 5th or just the public hearing?
Just public hearing.
Public hearing.
And so we don't know when the vote will actually be yet.
I don't know. I do not believe their intention was to vote on the 5th. I believe it was simply the public hearing as to the 5th. I'll check with Mr. Minter today. That's all I know.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, Board Member Campbell.
Thank you. If you want to go back and watch it after they're done with all of their county commission meeting, because you can't just go in like we can on ours on YouTube and actually get caught up. No, you have to wait. And they're in recess right now and whatever. So, but it's between 10:24 and 10:37 is when they're talking about it. So I think hearing their commentary might be something that you all would be interested. So you're not having to fast forward and try and figure it out. Just want to give you a little time stamp on that. So probably an hour and 20 some odd minutes in, you could see that. The only other thing that I wanted to ask was, now that we have moved into our beautiful new central warehouse, and I also happened to stop into the old warehouse and see that as they were vacating that space, and I believe everything is cleaned out of that now. I didn't know when we would be getting an update on the recommendations from the district as to what to do with that property. That was my only question.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Campbell. Any updates as far as that?
So we would need to get a new appraisal if the board would like us to do that. There will be some cost. If the board would like us to move forward, we have vacated that building.
So
Yes.
Chair, it would be my recommendation that we move forward with an appraisal of that building because at this point it is vacant and there is no designated use for the district for it. So that would be
Two.
my
Let's go.
recommendation. Do we have consensus, I
I
guess?
believe we do.
I agree.
Yep, we're good? Okay,
Thank you very much.
awesome, thank you. All right, Board Member James, we'll shoot down to you.
I'm just grateful for the conversations we've had today and the willingness of the board to have the dialogue and get to a landing place for today. I'm grateful for the county commission moving the sales tax on. We've had extensive conversation about the need there, and we have to get these policies to a board vote, and I was looking, and we only have one board meeting in March. Is that correct?
This is spring break.
Because of spring break. So these policies won't be on for a vote then until that last meeting, the only meeting in March?
Right.
Okay, so just for the public to be aware, that would be the March 26th board meeting, we would be voting on these policies. Okay,
All the ones that are ready will be ready.
March sets the public hearing notice,
oh,
and then April is the actual vote.
Second Tuesday in April.
okay,
It's a
Got it.
two-step.
bureaucracy is beautiful. Okay, thank you, that was my only comment.
Okay, thank you, Board Member James. Board Member Cummings.
Once again, it's amazing the things that we get done when we sit and talk it out and put our heads together. We have some diverse people on this board that all have in the best interest the students, the staff, and our county as a whole. So I'm grateful for all that has taken place here today, our conversations. I'm grateful for where we did land on these issues. Sometimes those issues can end up being polarizing. However, we saw that they were not polarizing issues. They were issues that we were pretty much all in agreement on. We just had to fine tune them. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm too also grateful to the county commission for moving forward with this process with the ballot, putting the thing on the ballot. And we're heading in some positive, good waters. We're heading into some good waters. So looking forward to see what's going to happen in the next few months.
That's right. Thank you, Board Member Cummings. Vice Chair Conrad.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I, too, am grateful for the conversation that's been had today. Everybody's input had influence on where we ended up, and so I'm grateful for the team's work. And Attorney Powers, thank you for your work and helping this run as smoothly as possible. I know there was a lot of discussion today, more than we maybe anticipated, but we come and you have everything ready for us and prepared, and so I'm really grateful for that and the work that your team does. I do want to offer a reminder, Friday is the Black History Gala. Reverend Cummings will be honored, and
Yes.
Mr. McFadden will be honored, and so I'm looking forward to that activity on Friday. And I think that's it. We've talked a lot this morning, but thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And yes, great momentum continues. I'm grateful to everyone with their respective roles that helps make that happen and continues to be so supportive of our board and just of the mission of helping every student authentically succeed. I just have one reminder that we will be together again. This is a week of togetherness. Another week of togetherness. We'll be together Thursday, February 22nd for our regular administrative briefing and work session. That will begin at 9 a.m. And then, as Vice Chair Conrad shared, I think we'll all be together again on Friday night at 6 o'clock at Mary Sue Rich for the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So that should be a wonderful evening. Thank you to all, and we'll look forward to seeing you Thursday, if not before. If there's nothing else for the good of the cause, we will adjourn at 12:21 p.m. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.